Good morning. This hearing of the Committee on the Judiciary on America's immigration system, opportunities for legal immigration and enforcement of laws against illegal immigration will come to order. Today we hold the first hearing of the Judiciary Committee in the 113th Congress, and I will recognize myself for an opening statement after I welcome the ranking member. How have you been? Good. This year, Congress will engage in a momentous debate on immigration. This will be a massive undertaking with implications for the future direction of our nation. As such, we must move forward methodically and evaluate this issue in stages, taking care to fully vet the pros and cons of each piece. This debate is often emotionally charged. That is because it is not about abstract statistics and concepts, but rather about real people with real problems trying to provide a better life for their families. This holds true for U.S. citizens, for legal residents, and for those unlawfully residing in the United States. I urge the members of this committee to keep that in mind as we begin our examination. America is a nation of immigrants. Everyone among us can go back a few or several generations to our own relatives who came to America in search of a better life for themselves and their families. But we are also a nation of laws. I think we can all agree that our nation's immigration system is in desperate need of repair, and it is not working as efficiently and fairly as it should be. The American people and members of Congress have a lot of questions about how our legal immigration system should work. They have a lot of questions about why our immigration laws have not always been sufficiently enforced. And they have a lot of questions about how a large-scale legalization program would work, what it would cost, and how it would prevent illegal immigration in the future. Immigration reform must honor both our foundation of the rule of law and our history as a nation of immigrants. This issue is too complex and too important to not examine each piece in detail. We can't rush to judgment. That is why the committee's first hearing will begin to explore ways to fix our broken system. Future hearings will take place in the Immigration and Border Security Subcommittee under the leadership of Chairman Gowdy. Today we will begin our examination of the U.S. immigration system by evaluating our current legal immigration system and ways to improve it, as well as the history of the enforcement of our immigration laws. The United States has the most generous legal immigration system in the world, providing permanent residence to over 1 million immigrants a year. And yet, all is not well. Prospective immigrant workers with approved petitions often have to wait years for green cards to become available. So do their employers. It has gotten so bad that the immigrant scholar Vivek Wadhwa who will be testifying before the committee today, states that if I were a young immigrant technologist in my mid-30s, stuck on an H-1B visa in America and trapped in a middling job, I would probably have decided to return to Australia or India. What does this foretell for America's continued economic competitiveness? Furthermore, legal permanent residents of the United States have to endure years of separation before they can be united with their spouses and minor children. Our laws also erect unnecessary hurdles for farmers who put food on America's tables. Our agriculture guest worker program is simply unworkable and needs to be reformed. At the same time, we allocate many thousands of green cards on the basis of pure luck through the diversity visa lottery program. And we allocate many thousands of green cards to non-nuclear family members. Some characterize this as chain migration, which former Florida Governor Jeb Bush has recently written does not promote the nation's economic interests. It is instructive to note that while America selects about 12% of our legal immigrants on the basis of their education and skills, the other main immigrant-receiving countries of Australia, the United Kingdom, and Canada each select over 60% of their immigrants on this basis. These are just a few of the issues plaguing our legal immigration system, not to mention the larger question of how to address the estimated 10 million individuals unlawfully present in the U.S. Whether or not America should become more like our global competitors, we do need to have a serious conversation about the goals of America's legal immigration system. Today, we will also discuss the extent to which past and present administrations have enforced our immigration laws and whether we believe those efforts have been sufficient and effective. This is a crucial question. The year 1986 was the last time Congress passed comprehensive immigration reform. At that time, Congress granted legal status to millions who were unlawfully present in exchange for new laws against the employment of illegal immigrants in order to prevent the need for future amnesties. However, these employer sanctions were never seriously implemented or enforced. Even Alan Simpson, the Senate author of the 1986 legislation, has concluded that, despite the best of intentions, the law did not satisfy its expectations or its promises. This committee needs to take the time to learn from the past so that our efforts to reform our immigration laws do not repeat the same mistakes. Regardless of the conclusions of this national conversation, I think we can all agree that America will remain true to our heritage as a nation of immigrants as well as a nation of laws. I look forward to the testimony of all of today's witnesses, and now I turn to our ranking member, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Conyers.
Thank you, Chairman Goodlatte. This is an important hearing, and you started off on a very important analysis of where we are. And I'm not here to critique your presentation, but to make my own. But I could summarize what I think we're going to be addressing in 3 phrases. 1, comprehensive. 2, a path to citizenship. And 3, border security more than ever. Well, let's take the one we can most easily agree on, is border security. It's improving. It is, well, there's always somebody that's going to get through, but I think that we have a general consensus about the ways that we may do a better job. And I would like to just throw out that there may be a few members of the House Judiciary Committee that would like to go to the border and examine this and talk with those who are responsible for it. And I propose with the chairman that we continue this discussion as these hearings proceed. Now, the notion of comprehensive immigration has been pushed around and bandied about. But the fact of the matter is that this is one big challenge that I don't think we can handle on a piecemeal basis. My experience with this subject tells me that with 10, 11 million undocumented people living among, we've got to approach this in terms of a more holistic way. Now, I think that there must be an earned legalization process that is fair but firm, and that is not that is not subject to a lot of manipulation. And you know, to my colleagues, there's in some quarters among our citizens more agreement than there is sometimes in this body. And I'm hoping, and I believe that it can be done, that this committee will rise above our political instincts and try to serve the nation and these American citizens in a very important way. I hope no one uses the term illegal immigrants here today. Our citizens are not illegal. The people in this country are not illegal. They're out of status. They're new Americans that are immigrants. And I think that we can forge a path to citizenship that will be able to pass muster. We've got the senatorial bipartisan support working very nicely thus far. And if it pleases the chairman, I would like to yield the rest of my limited time, little time I have left, to the gentleman, Mr. Luis Gutierrez, who is now back on the committee and who I celebrate.
Thank you.
Mr. Conyers, the time has expired, but in recognition of the return of Mr. Gutierrez and your generosity, we will yield him 1 minute to close your remarks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Conyers, Congressman Conyers, and Chairman Goodlatte. I expressed to Chairman Goodlatte that I come back to the committee, giving up 20 years of seniority on financial services, because I believe that this committee is that important. Chairman said to me, don't put too much pressure on me. I just wanted to share that I didn't come here to undermine anyone's work and to challenge anybody's work, but to work in a collaborative spirit with you, Chairman Goodlatte, with my colleagues here, to frame a comprehensive immigration solution to our broken immigration system. I want to welcome the witnesses that are here today. And just to share with everyone, this issue is important to me. And I didn't come here with an engineering degree, with a PhD. My mom had a 6th grade education. My dad didn't graduate from high school. But I think they did pretty well with their son. And I've come here simply to say that while I don't hold any of these prestigious degrees either, that immigrants have come here to do and to sweat and to toil in this country, and that if we could just part from the premise, and that is, as Gandhi might have said today, right? Let's have politics with principles, because the absence of one really leads us down a very treacherous road that I don't think America wants to live in. So I thank you, Chairman Goodlatte, and I really look forward to working with all of my wonderful colleagues here, and especially, obviously, Zoe Loughran and Mr. Gowdy. I am looking forward to that subcommittee experience with the both of you. Thank you so much for allowing me to express myself here this morning.
We're glad to have you back, Mr. Gutierrez, and now it is my pleasure to recognize the chairman of the Immigration Subcommittee, the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of years ago, a young African author spoke at a high school in South Carolina. Mr. Chairman, she was a beautiful, talented young woman, and when she lifted her arm to brush away the hair from her eyes, I saw something I have never seen before, at least not in this country, which was someone's hands who had been cut off with a machete. When she was 12 years old, living in Sierra Leone, rebel soldiers came to her village during the Civil War. She tried to run. She tried to hide. She asked God to let her die, but the soldiers found her. And they cut off her hands and mockingly told her to go to the president and ask for another pair. And that 12-year-old girl, Mr. Chairman, remembered thinking to herself, what's a president? Collectively, Mr. Chairman, we all understand why people want to come to this country, to escape persecution, to taste freedom and liberty, to know that hard work and education and a level playing field can combine forces to transform lives. Escaping conflict and hardship is one thing, Mr. Chairman. Picking a new home is another. And America is picked because we are a country that embraces justice. We reward fairness. We're a nation of laws. The poorest of the poor has the same standing in court as the richest of the rich. We believe in the even application of the law because law provides order, structure, predictability, and security. And what we cannot become is a nation where the law is enforced selectively or not at all. And what we cannot become, Mr. Chairman, is a country where the laws apply to some of the people some of the time. The President from time to time, Mr. Chairman, says that he wants a country where everyone plays by the same rules. With respect, they aren't called rules in this country. They're called laws. And each of us takes an oath to enforce them, including those with which we may disagree. Because when the law is ignored or applied in an uneven way, we begin to see the erosion of the very foundation upon which this republic was built. And make no mistake, Mr. Chairman, as surely as today one may benefit from the non-compliance or non-enforcement of a law, that same person will be clamoring to have the law enforced in another capacity. So we seek to harmonize two foundational precepts, Mr. Chairman. Number one is humanity, and number two is respect for the rule of law. And history is whispering, as you noted, Mr. Chairman, that we have traveled this road before. In 1986, we were told that immigration had been settled once and for all. We were told that in exchange for secure borders and employment verification, those who entered the country illegally would not suffer the full panoply of legal consequences. In the minds of many, Mr. Chairman, the country got amnesty, but is still waiting 25 years later on the border security and the employment verification. So here we are back again, asking our fellow citizens to trust us. And many, despite ourselves, Mr. Chairman, remain open to legislative expressions of humanity and grace. But they will be watching, skeptically, to see if we are serious about enforcing the rule of law. Are we serious about ending the insidious practice of human trafficking? Are we serious about punishing those who prey on folks with false promises and fraudulent documents? Are we serious about border security and employment verification? Are we serious about making this the last time we have this conversation? Or are we simply playing political games with people's lives and undercutting the respect for the rule of law, which ironically is the very reason they seek to come to this country in the first place? We shall see. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, and it's now my pleasure to recognize the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, the ranking member of the Immigration Subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I congratulate you on holding this hearing, our committee's first hearing on our broken immigration system. I appreciate that gesture, as I do your recent public statement that you are open to reform and that America does not need a trail of tears to the border. I congratulate Mr. Gowdy as well on his chairmanship, and I look forward to working with him to find that balance between respect for the rule of law as well as our morality and humanity. I look forward to working with both of you in a bipartisan manner on these reform efforts. But as we move forward, we need to recognize that our broken system does immeasurable harm every day that it goes unreformed. A trail of tears to the border is not that far off from the system we currently have. Every day, our system tears families apart, husbands from their wives, parents from their children. If we want a moral and humane system, we have a lot of work to do. America is ready for us to do that work. I participated in the immigration debate during my 18 years in Congress, and long before that as an immigration attorney and law professor teaching immigration law. Today, the country is past the point of debating whether we need reform. They're simply counting on us to get it done. And the growing bipartisan consensus means I think that we can get it done. Conservative leaders from Jeb Bush and Karl Rove to Sean Hannity and Bill O'Reilly have signaled support for comprehensive reform efforts, including a path for undocumented immigrants. Even Rush Limbaugh told Senator Marco Rubio that his efforts for immigration reform are admirable and noteworthy and recognize reality. We've also seen members in both parties in the House and Senate voice strong support for immigration reform. We know with the bipartisan blueprint for immigration reform released last week by 8 senators, and there are similar bipartisan discussions in the House. It will take such bipartisanship to solve this problem, and I'm hopeful that this is the year we finally enact top-to-bottom reform of our immigration laws. As we'll hear today, our current system is dysfunctional in many ways, keeping families apart for decades and hindering economic growth and American global competitiveness. Designing a sensible legal immigration system is critical to preserving the rule of law. We need a legal immigration system that works so that workers and families who want to come here are able to go through that system rather than around it. Yet despite the incredible need to reform the system, all we've done is enforce the heck out of it, especially over the last several years. We're now removing record numbers of undocumented immigrants each year, while attempted border crossings are at their lowest levels in more than 40 years. According to experts, net migration from Mexico is now zero and likely lower than that. Every year, we spend more money on immigration enforcement, nearly $18 billion per year, than on all other federal law enforcement combined. All of this enforcement hasn't solved the problem, and it should not be used to delay top-to-bottom reform of our laws. What needs to be done is not that complicated. We know a reform bill must include additional border enforcement as well as employment eligibility verification to secure the workforce. We need to reform our employment visa system so that tech companies, farmers, and other U.S. businesses have access to needed workers, and we need to reform the family system to help keep families together. We also need to provide a way for 10 or 11 million undocumented immigrants to come out of the shadows, get right with the law in a way that is fair and practical. A few words of caution. First, partial legalization, as some are suggesting, is a dangerous path, and we need only to look at France and Germany to see how unwise it is to create a permanent underclass. What makes America special is that people come here, assimilate, and become American with all of the rights and responsibilities that citizenship bestows. With the exception of slavery and the Chinese Exclusion Act, our laws have never barred persons from becoming citizens, and we should not start now. Second, we must not fall into the trap of calling for piecemeal reform. As Governor Jeb Bush recently wrote in the Wall Street Journal, Congress should avoid such quick fixes and commit itself instead to comprehensive immigration reform. Immigration, as he points out, is a system, and it needs systematic overhaul. Finally, we must make it easier to keep critical workers who can keep America competitive and grow our economy, but we should not do so by closing the door on family-based immigrants. Family unity has been the bedrock of our immigration system since the Immigration and Nationality Act was enacted in 1952. In addition to strengthening American families, family-based immigration plays an important role in bolstering our economy. Research shows that immigrants, most of whom come here through the family system, are twice as likely to start businesses in the U.S. as native-born people. And immigrant businesses, including small non-tech businesses, have grown at 2.5 times the national average. I often say I'm glad that Google is in Mountain View rather than Moscow. Like Intel and Yahoo, Google was founded by an immigrant, but it's worth noting that none of the founders of these companies came to the United States because of their skills. Sergey Brin, Jerry Yang, Andy Grove, all came here through our family-based system or because they were refugees or the children of refugees. What made these founders special were the traits they share with immigrants of all kinds: entrepreneurism, risk-taking, a desire for a better life. These are among the most admired values in our country, as it should be, because it's the secret sauce that makes America great. From Alexander Hamilton to Andrew Carnegie to Albert Einstein, we are a nation forged by immigrants. It's time we fully embrace that immigration is good for our country. It's time we do our part to devise a way for the people who have enough get up and go to get up and go and come to our shores and bring their talents and contributions to our society and to our economy and to become Americans with us. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
I thank the gentlewoman. Without objection, all other members' opening statements will be made a part of the record, and we'll turn now to our very distinguished first panel of witnesses, and I'll begin by introducing that first panel. Our first witness on this panel is Mr. Vivek Wadhwa, a visiting scholar at the University of California, Berkeley, a senior research associate at Harvard Law School, and Director of Research at the Center for Entrepreneurship and Research Commercialization at Duke University. He is also a faculty member and advisor at Singularity University and writes a regular column for both the Washington Post and Bloomberg Business Week. Last year, his book, The Immigrant Exodus, Why America is Losing the Global Race to Capture Entrepreneurial Talent, was named a Book of the Year by The Economist magazine. Mr. Wadhwa received his bachelor's degree from the University of Canberra in Australia and received his MBA from New York University's Stern School of Business. We thank him for coming today. Our next witness is Mr. Michael Teitelbaum, who currently serves as the Senior Director of the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. From 1980 to 1990, he served as one of 12 commissioners of the U.S. Commission for the Study of International Migration and Cooperative Economic Development. Prior to this, he served as a commissioner of the U.S. Commission on Immigration Reform, which completed its work in December 1997. Mr. Teitelbaum received his bachelor's degree from Reed College and subsequently earned his Ph.D. in demography from Oxford University, where he was a Rhodes Scholar. We are glad to have him joining us today. The third member of this first panel is Dr. Puneet Arora, currently serving as the Vice President for Immigration Voice, a coalition of 75,000 highly skilled foreign professionals. He also serves as the Medical Director for Genentech, a biotech firm in San Francisco, California. Dr. Arora joined Genentech, then Amgen, in 2008 as Clinical Research Medical Director. He has been a volunteer with Immigration Voice since 2006 and leads the Physicians chapter as well as the Minnesota and Southern California chapters. Dr. Arora received his medical degree from the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in 1994. He completed his residency training in internal medicine at Southern Illinois School of Medicine in 1999 and received fellowship training in endocrinology, diabetes, and metabolism at New York University School of Medicine. He practiced in a medically underserved area and was subsequently granted a national interest waiver for permanent residence in the United States by USCIS. We thank Dr. Arora for serving as a witness today as well. Our final witness is the Honorable Julian Castro, Mayor of San Antonio, Texas. First elected in 2009 and re-elected in 2011, Mayor Castro earned his undergraduate degree from Stanford University with honors and distinction in 1996 and a Juris Doctorate from Harvard Law School in 2000. In 2001, at the age of 26, Castro became the youngest elected city councilman at that time in San Antonio history. Mayor Castro's brother, Joaquin, serves in the U.S. House of Representatives. We are pleased to have the mayor with us today, and I will turn to the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, for 15 seconds of additional welcome to the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Mayor Castro is particularly well placed, and unique for this role as a witness today. I'd like to welcome him as a fellow Texan. I know that his brother, a congressperson, member of the United States House of Representatives, has already done so. But as a mayor of one of the world's international cities who sees people coming from all backgrounds, you are well placed to understand what immigration and the opportunities and contributions that immigrants and those who come to this country for a better opportunity can contribute. And I thank you so very much for your leadership of your city and your presence here today. Welcome, fellow Texan. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson Lee. And I now turn to the former chairman of the committee and the gentleman from San Antonio, Texas, Mr. Smith, for a comparably calculated 15 seconds of welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to stick to the 15. I, too, wanted to welcome the mayor of my hometown, San Antonio. Mayor, as we both know, San Antonio is a wonderfully livable, tricultural city, and you have done a great job representing us in so many ways. So welcome today, and also I want to say to you that I enjoy serving with your brother in Congress, who is sitting behind you as well. So we'll talk more and look forward to your testimony as well.
Welcome to all of our witnesses, and we'll begin with Mr. Wadhwa.
Chairman Goodlatte, members of the House Committee, thank you for giving me a chance to speak to you. You know, being here in D.C., it's very easy to be pessimistic. Everything about here, we worry about China, whether they're going to rule the future. We worry about shortages. We worry about everything in the world. And when you're worried about a lack of resources, shortages, when you worry about countries like China taking over the world, you become very pessimistic. You begin to wonder if there's shortages of engineers or a glut of engineers. In fact, some of the debates we'll have is, are there too many, are we graduating too many scientists? All of this is based on a perspective of yesterday. You know, the United States has a way of reinventing itself. Every 30 or 40 years, we get really, really worried about ourselves, and we start developing an inferiority complex, wondering why the rest of the world is better than we are. And then we wake up and realize that, hey, we're ahead again. The United States is in the middle of another reinvention right now. As we speak, we're in the middle of a next major rebound. Technology is changing the entire landscape and giving America its edge back, so much so that, let's start with manufacturing. I'll give you a crash course in exponential technologies. You know, just like we saw oil being something we worried about running out of oil, now you have newspapers writing about Saudi America. Fracking came along. Within 5 years, it changed our entire perspective of oil. That's just one small thing. Look at computing. 5 years ago, none of you would ever have used smartphones or been on Twitter or social media. Now all of us do that. Well, practically all of us do that. But the point is that we carry in our pockets more computing power than existed the day we were born. Think about it. 30 years ago, we would have banned this device because it was more powerful than a Cray supercomputer. Today, it sits in our pocket waiting for us to check emails. That's how fast computing has advanced. The same thing is happening in manufacturing. If you look at the advances in robotics, in artificial intelligence, in 3D printing, within the next 5 to 7 years, my prediction is that China's manufacturing industry will be toast, that it'll start coming back to America like we've never imagined before. You know, we have debates about healthcare. We worry about multi-trillion-dollar deficits and our system becoming bankrupt. Healthcare is advancing like you can't imagine. Between digital medicine and genomics, there are major advances happening. There's a quantified self. You know, for example, I'm a heart patient. My iPhone case is an EKG machine. I hope none of you have ever had heart problems or never had to get an EKG done. They're really painful. I touch the two leads on my iPhone. It does a complete EKG for me. I can mail that EKG to my cardiologist. The way technology is going, 2 or 3 years from now, I won't need a cardiologist to read my EKG. It'll be read by a computer on the cloud. This same type of technology is being built in many other areas, which means we have preventative medicine. We'll be able to save tremendous amounts of money on curing disease because we'll prevent it. This is happening regardless of what we do. This is happening at light speed. You also have advances happening in other fields. For example, in California, we have the Google self-driving car. By the time it's released later in this decade, it's going to change the face of cities. A third of the land use in cities is for parking. We get stuck in traffic jams, 30,000 highway deaths. All of these things can be eliminated by one new invention. Also, 90% of the energy we use on transportation can be reduced by automated self-driving vehicles. There are major advances happening in education. These technologies are still expensive right now. In India, they're going to be giving kids in school and teachers tablets which are bigger than this, as sophisticated as the iPhone 1 was, for $20. Within the next 5 years, you're going to have another 3 billion people coming on the internet worldwide. Look at the revolution that telephones and then social media created in the Middle East. In China, the government is quaking because its people are connected, they can talk to each other. Imagine what happens over the next 5 or 7 years when the entire world comes online with technology. These are sort of earth-changing things that are happening, and it's all because of technology. And who's driving technology? Skilled immigrants are. People like me, people, engineers, scientists. It's a whole assortment of people that are driving these changes. And guess what? Until recently, 52% of the startups in Silicon Valley, the most innovative place on this planet, were immigrants. So the people who are driving this boom I'm talking about, this technology which is reinventing America, are skilled immigrants. Representative Gutierrez, I understand what you said about your parents not having been educated and the fact that things were very different. In an era in which skilled labor didn't have as much value as it today, it made sense that we definitely need the unskilled workers. There's no doubt about that. But in this new era, it's all about skill. The people who are making this happen are engineers, scientists, doctors, most importantly, entrepreneurs. So we have a choice right now. We can either trip up the entrepreneurs who are going to reinvent America and save the world, or we can fix this problem instantly and create a better world. Because we have the ability right now to solve humanity's grand challenges. We can create unlimited energy, unlimited water, unlimited food. We can create security which protects us from threats. We can do all of these amazing things right now using technology, and all within the next 5 or 7 years. I can almost guarantee you that 5 years from now, we're going to be debating how do we distribute some of the abundance we're creating, because just like we're talking about oil being abundant, we're going to be talking about many other things becoming abundant. We'll have different debates over here. But it's imperative that we allow Silicon Valley, our entrepreneurs, our technologists to do their magic and to save us. A strong America is important for the world. We can solve the world's grand challenges, and immigration is one of the keys to making it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wadhwa. Mr. Teitelbaum, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Conyers, members of the Judiciary, thank you for inviting me to report on the recommendations of the U.S. Commission on Immigration Reform. It was a commission established by the Immigration Act of 1990, and it's often called the Jordan Commission after its chair, Barbara Jordan, Congresswoman Jordan, who was, of course, a distinguished member of this very committee. 8 of the members of the commission were appointed by the House and Senate majority and minority leadership, and the chair was appointed by the President. The mandate was very broad, and you have in your written testimony from me a copy of the executive summary of the commission report, the final report, which includes the mandate, so I won't repeat that given the time. Now, as the chair has said, these are contentious and emotional disagreements on these issues, so I wanted to tell you that the 9 members of this commission included among them almost all perspectives on immigration and refugee issues, and I told my wife there was little chance that this commission was going to be able to reach any substantial majority agreement on anything. Ultimately, that commission, all of its recommendations, which you have before you in the written testimony, all of them were unanimous or unanimous less 1. Since we're focusing on legal immigration today, let me try to very quickly in the time I have summarize the Commission recommendations on that part of its mandate. The Commission was a strong supporter for a properly regulated legal immigration system that serves the national interest, and it decried hostility and discrimination against immigrants as antithetical to the traditions and interests of the United States. It said that a well-regulated immigration system enhances the potential benefits of immigration, but if it were not well regulated, it would not. The Commission said that there was a need to set priorities in immigration because there was much more demand than there was available visas. It should set priorities and it should deliver on those priorities. And with respect to the national interest, it said these were the 3 priorities. Unification of immediate or nuclear families, as one of the members has already spoken to, admission of those highly skilled workers who are legitimately needed to support the international competitiveness of the U.S. workforce, as the previous witness has just mentioned, and refugee admissions, which haven't yet been mentioned a great deal, refugee admissions and other actions that affirm U.S. commitments to provide refuge to the persecuted. And the number of visas should flow from those priorities. The third point was, from the Commission, the third recommendation and finding was that the policies that it was reviewing in the 1990s were broadly consistent with these 3 priorities, but they included elements among them that were creating serious problems in the 1990s and that needed thoughtful attention. A 4th recommendation was that priorities in the family category should be established, and the Commission concluded that the priority should be placed on the expeditious admission of immediate or nuclear family members in this order: spouses and minor children of U.S. citizens, number 1, parents of U.S. citizens, number 2, and spouses and minor children of legal permanent immigrants, number 3. And it therefore recommended a reallocation of the visas in the family-based system from lower priority categories outside of those priorities Those were the adult children and adult siblings of U.S. citizens and the so-called diversity visas, two of the highest priority categories that I just listed. The problem with the lower priority categories is they had never been given very many visas, and there was an enormous demand, and therefore very large backlogs in those categories. So the recommendation there was that we should stop trying to manage immigration by backlog. In effect, we are making promises that we can't keep, and instead focus on prompt admission of the highest priority categories. And had that been done, all of those categories would have been admitted very promptly within 1 year of application. But of course, it didn't happen. And in the absence of such actions, these backlogs have actually become longer and more extensive. The fifth recommendation was that a well-regulated admission system for skilled immigrants is in the national interest. And we already heard Vivek Wadhwa talk about that. So I won't say a lot about it, but it's consistent with what he said. They contribute, when needed, they contribute to the global competitiveness of the U.S. workforce. And then there's a second point, which is that we want immigrants to do well in the United States. We want them to prosper. And if they're skilled, they're more likely to prosper than if they're not. However, then this was a bit of a controversial recommendation. The Commission found that the labor certification process for this category did not protect U.S. workers from unfair employment competition and does not serve the national interest. So it advocated a new and more market-driven approach for selection among those categories. The sixth recommendation was that admission of low-skilled and unskilled workers is not in the national interest. It recommended against the continuation of the small number of visas for employment-based visas for low-skilled and unskilled workers. It could find no compelling evidence that employers who offer adequate remuneration would face difficulties in hiring from the large pools of low-skilled and unskilled workers in the U.S. workforce. And of course, large numbers of such workers would be continuing to flow, much larger than the number of visas in this category, continue to flow under the family and refugee visa categories. Seventh, that admission of large numbers of temporary or guest workers in agriculture and other fields, the Commission said, would be a grievous mistake. The Commission found that such programs lead to particularly harmful effects. Guest workers are vulnerable to exploitation, and their presence in large numbers depresses the wages and working conditions of U.S. workers, which, by the way, includes recent immigrants.
I want to go ahead and just summarize each of the last 2 points, because I know you do want to get all 9 in, but we are out of time.
I mentioned the refugee thing, and the Commission recommended a well-regulated resettlement program. And finally, it recommended more flexibility and adaptability of immigration policies needed as circumstances changed. So in my testimony, you'll see an example of another country with quite a lot of similarities to the U.S., in which they've come up with a way to have a more flexible system that is based on rigorous analysis of where the needed employment-based visas might be. And I'll suspend at that point, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And what country is that?
That's the United Kingdom.
Thank you. Dr. Arora, welcome.
Thank you. Distinguished Chairman, good luck.
You should hit the button on your microphone and pull it close.
Thank you.
Pull it close to you. Pull the microphone close to you.
Distinguished Chairman Goodlatte, Ranking Member Conyers, and members of this committee. On behalf of Immigration Voice and the many highly skilled professionals and their families waiting for permanent resident status to the United States, I thank you for this opportunity to contribute my views towards immigration reform. Immigration Voice is a grassroots organization of highly skilled foreign men and women that have come together to advocate for a change in the employment-based green card system. Today, I would like to talk to you about the problems faced by 1 million highly skilled foreign professionals and their families, future Americans, most of whom have been gainfully employed in the United States for a decade or more, but find themselves in lines for a green card. Our community is invested in America through our diligence, innovations, and productivity. Our children are Americans. This is our home. My journey through the employment-based backlog began in 1996 with a medical residency program at the Southern Illinois University School of Medicine in Springfield, followed by a fellowship in endocrinology, diabetes, and metabolism at the New York University School of Medicine, and then to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota for a fellowship in advanced diabetes. In 2003, I joined a clinical practice with the Health Partners Medical Group in St. Paul, Minnesota, and as assistant professor of medicine at the University of Minnesota Medical School. My practice was in a medically underserved area with a substantial population of indigent patients. Even so, my national interest waiver was significantly delayed. In 2008, I was offered the position of clinical research medical director at Amgen, the world's largest biotechnology company. I was able to accept this offer only because of a small window of relief offered in July of 2007 that allowed me to gain work authorization. Many of my colleagues in Immigration Voice were not so fortunate, and till today, they'll continue to lack the ability to change jobs without losing their place in the green card line. I now work for Genentech as medical director for early development, and at the end of 2011, my green card application was finally approved after more than 15 years of life in the United States. And as I continue towards citizenship, I count myself as fortunate. Today, USCIS is just now adjudicating applications for applicants like me from the year 2004. Spending a decade or more waiting for permanent residency takes its toll on professionals and on their families. Children age out and they have to secure their own visas to go to college. Traveling abroad or just maintaining legal status takes a constant infusion of time and money to renew documents. Scientists often cannot get grants, and sadly, even motivated parents cannot adopt children. These problems all generally arise from what we term the double backlogs, the green card shortage backlog and the per country backlog. And I want to make a few brief points on both these. We have the largest and the fastest growing highly skilled economy in the world. It's America's fastest growing export. We are fighting over green card numbers here for highly educated people, each of whom is a net job creator, according to the American Enterprise Institute. While America is bleeding some of the best minds from its borders, many of whom were trained in US schools. As parents of American children, we see firsthand that America is struggling to produce qualified students in STEM, and I worry as a father of two wonderful girls. We have heard proposals for increased fees to pay for STEM programs in the States, and we support that. It can only help, and all help in this matter is welcome. On the second part of the double backlog, I want to start by thanking this committee, and especially Representative Chaffetz, Smith, and Lofgren, for their amazing bipartisan work on per-country elimination. We fell short on the Senate on process in spite of overwhelming support. Regardless, we know that just changing the per-country quota alone will not fix the overall shortage of green cards, but it will help to alleviate some of the burdens for America's most experienced, highly skilled green card applicants. And again, we sincerely appreciate your efforts in this regard.
Thank you, Dr. Arora. Mayor Castro, we're pleased to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Chairman Goodlatte, and of course to Representative Jackson Lee and my hometown representative, Smith. Thank you for having me, to the ranking member Conyers, as well as the members of the committee. I come to you today as many things, as an American, as an optimist, the grandson of an immigrant orphan from Mexico who found opportunity in our great country, and is mayor of the nation's 7th largest city, a community that looks like the Texas and the America of tomorrow. Immigration for all of us is more than a political issue. It's who we are as Americans. From Plymouth Rock to Ellis Island and Galveston, Texas, to the sandy shores of Florida and the rocky coast of California, immigrants have made ours the greatest country in the world. Today, however, our immigration system is badly broken. But there is hope. This hearing, and more importantly, the bipartisan legislation that I believe can be enacted because of it, shows that we are on the cusp of real progress. The President and a growing number of bipartisan lawmakers have laid the framework for what Americans support: comprehensive, common sense reform. we must do at least three things: further strengthen border security, streamline the legal immigration process so that law-abiding companies can get the workers they need in this 21st century global economy, and create a path to citizenship to bring the estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country out of the shadows and into the full light of the American dream. In Texas, we know firsthand that this administration has put more boots on the ground along the border than at any other time in our history, which has led to unprecedented success in removing dangerous individuals with criminal records. But Democrats and Republicans can agree that the work to ensure America's safety and security is ongoing and should be a part of any future legislative agenda. The reforms that you have on the table are also pro-family and pro-business. Outdated visa allocations that separate husbands and wives, mothers and children, and brothers and sisters for years and sometimes decades make no sense. It also makes no sense that while some employers choose to flout the rule of law and exploit employees, other companies who want to play by the rules are handcuffed by rigid employment ceilings and burdensome regulations. Every year, as competition increases across the globe, American companies throw up their hands and watch engineers, nurses, and entrepreneurs who were trained in American universities leave in frustration only to invent new products, heal the sick, and innovate in other countries. What Americans deserve is a system that works, a system that's efficient, that's accountable, that in our nation's best interests puts the undocumented immigrants already here on a road to earned citizenship. Those immigrants take on many faces, from Virginia to North Carolina to Utah. In San Antonio, those faces include students like Benita Veliz. Benita, like many so-called dreamers, was brought to this country as a child from Mexico. She learned English, played by the rules, and achieved astounding academic success, even becoming a valedictorian of my alma mater, Thomas Jefferson High School in San Antonio. She was a National Merit Scholar, and Benita earned a bachelor's degree by the time she was 20 years old. By any measure, Benita is an American success story. But under current immigration law, she's in limbo. America is her home in every single sense of the word, except under our broken immigration system. Since the signing of the Declaration of Independence, America has distinguished itself as the land of opportunity, the place where the human spirit is free to reach its full potential. In this 21st century global economy, we need Benita and immigrants like her to be competitive. But we all know that as one generation of Americans has passed on to the next, this great nation has drawn tremendous strength from immigrants, whether they came from Germany or Italy or India or Mexico. A hearing is a great start, but a hearing is not enough. Let's rise above the political fray. Let's once again show that no challenge is too big for America. Ladies and gentlemen, America is watching. Let's get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Castro. Dr. Aurora, you gave an excellent statement, and I thought it was full and complete, but apparently I called you before your time was expired and maybe before your statement was finished. Did you want to summarize your statement?
Thank you. I just have a little bit left, so I'm just going to complete it. The benefits of removing per-country limits will accrue to only one nation in this world, the United States of America. Ultimately, we do not care how you fix the system. We just want it fixed, not in 5 years, not in 10 years, now, this year. On that note, there are so many proposals out there for broader high-skilled immigration reform. They include recapturing unused visas, providing additional U.S. STEM visas, exemptions for spouses and children, early filing, exemptions for physicians who provide service in underserved areas, and we support all of these. We're extremely encouraged by the introduction of the Immigration Innovation Act of 2013 in the Senate, and we really hope that a similar bipartisan bill will be introduced in the House. This innovation economy is global, and the ripe export markets and the foreign professionals in America creating products for these markets will not wait forever. Our futures are tied to the United States, as are those of our children. The growth of America's economy and the availability of jobs for Americans are of great significance to us and our families. We want nothing more than to see America prosper and grow while still remaining the most welcoming nation on the face of this earth. On behalf of Immigration Voice, again, my sincerest gratitude for this opportunity and the very patient hearing you've given me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arora, and I'll begin the questioning with you, Mr. Wadhwa. Which do you believe is a greater factor in encouraging foreign students and workers on temporary visas to return home, difficulties receiving green cards in the U.S. or expanding opportunities in their home countries?
They're both. In fact, when we surveyed several hundred returnees, they said it was greater opportunities. But I know in dealing with my students, what happens is that they look for jobs because they want to stay here for 2 or 3 years after they graduate. They can't get jobs because companies can't get H-1B visas, or they're worried about hiring foreigners because of the backlash. So they don't get the jobs.
I've got another question for you, and I'm going to go quickly because I have several I want to ask in a short period of time. As I noted in my opening statement, other primary immigrant-receiving countries like the UK and Canada and Australia select over 60% of their immigrants based on their education and skills, while the United States selects a little more than 10% on this basis. Which type of immigration system do you think makes the most sense for America?
We need both because you have to have families as well, but right now we need more skilled immigrants.
We're talking about ratios here, percentage.
I would increase the ratio of skilled immigrants dramatically.
Great. Okay, thank you. Next, Mr. Teitelbaum, I see that the Jordan Commission recommended eliminating the diversity lottery program. Since the Jordan Commission's recommendations were issued, somewhere in the magnitude of 800,000 diversity green cards have been issued. Can these green cards have been better utilized for another higher priority?
That was indeed the recommendation, that it should be used for higher priority categories.
And then to approach the second question I asked Mr. Wadhwa from a different vantage point, the Jordan Commission also stated that, quote, unless there is a compelling national interest to do otherwise, immigrants should be chosen on the basis of the skills they contribute to the U.S. economy. The Commission believes that the admission of nuclear family members and refugees provides such a compelling national interest. Reunification of adult children and siblings of adult citizens solely because of their family relationship is not as compelling. Isn't this what some refer to as chain migration? And isn't it true that over 2.5 million siblings of U.S. citizens are now on a waiting list for green cards, and some will have to wait over 2 decades? What does this say about the credibility of that aspect of our immigration system?
Yes, that is true. That is what we referred to as management by backlogs, in which you make promises that cannot be fulfilled, and you get these enormous and very long backlogs that are built up. So our recommendation was that those visa numbers be reallocated to the higher priority categories that we mentioned, and then there would be immediate admission of those people and no backlogs in those categories.
Thank you. And you, Mayor Castro, you state that comprehensive immigration reform should do 3 things: secure the border, streamline the legal immigration process, and provide a path to citizenship for 11 million illegal immigrants. Do you think that interior enforcement should play a role to discourage future immigration by those not documented by making jobs to them unavailable? Should that be a part of that comprehensive immigration reform?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do believe that, that enforcement, both in terms of active enforcement at our borders, and under this administration there's been tremendous progress with regard to enforcement. In fact, the triggers in the 2007 proposal have just about all been met. But going forward, of course, enforcement is part of the conversation.
And one of the aspects of enforcement that doesn't get as much attention here, although it does get attention in some of the states which have attempted to do things about it, is the fact that a large percentage of people who are not lawfully in the United States entered legally. on student visas, visitors visas, business visas, and overstayed their visas. And so the border and securing the border is not a component in dealing with that aspect of unlawful immigration. It has to be done in the interior of the country with verification programs with regard to employment, with cooperation amongst various law enforcement authorities, and so on. Do you think that should be part of the process?
Yeah, I think we agree that we can make the system work better for everyone, including for employers, including at our airports, in each and every way, both in terms of border security and interior security. Comprehensive immigration reform gives us the opportunity to make this work better at every single juncture.
And I want to give you an opportunity to answer the question of the day, and that is this. Are there options that we should consider between the extremes of mass deportation and a pathway to citizenship for those not lawfully present in the United States?
Well, let me say that I do believe that a pathway to citizenship should be the option that the Congress selects. I don't see that as an extreme option. In fact, as one of the representatives pointed out, if we look at our history, generally what we found is that Congress over time has chosen that option, that path to citizenship. So I see that, I would disagree with the characterization of that as the extreme. The extreme, I would say, just to fill that out, would be open borders. Nobody agrees with open borders. Everyone agrees that we need to secure our border, that the United States needs to improve its...
I think we agree on that, but the question is what to do about the 10 million or more people who are not lawfully here. Are you and do you think others open to finding some ground between a pathway to citizenship and the current law, which would be to require deportation in many circumstances, whether that's being enforced today or not?
I believe that, as the President has pointed out, as the senators who have worked on this have pointed out from both parties, that a path to citizenship is the best option. Now, I also understand that in terms of getting at what you may be thinking about, a guest worker program in the future has also been put out there. I know that there are some concerns about how you would set that up, but I think if you want to deal with issues going forward, that may be one way to do it. However, in terms of the 11 million folks who are here, certainly putting them on a path to citizenship, ensuring that after they pay taxes, they pay a fine, they learn English, they get to the back of the line, that's the best option.
I thank you. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Goodlatte, and I want to thank all the witnesses on the first panel. You've done a good job. We may not have settled much, but that's the way these things start out, isn't it? I just wanted to see if we could get a little more agreement on Chairman Goodlatte's last question. What do we do with 11 million people that are already here? Is there any of you that still have reservations about a path to citizenship that is firm and fair? We're not going to jail them or send them back. Can we hit a small chord of agreement on that one question? What do you think, Dr. Aurora?
We believe that a balanced approach to this is really important, one that's fair and is a win-win situation for everyone. Like I said before, we tend to be focused on issues that we are very familiar with, having been through the employment-based immigration system, but certainly we'd like to see a situation where Congress comes together and agrees on something that can go and get passed by the Senate and signed by the President and actually solve some of these problems in a balanced program. We like to not view immigration as a zero-sum game, and I think we
Sure.
all agree that it doesn't have to be that way.
Mr. Wadhwa, do you think that among reasonable people with strong differing views can come up with elements of a path to citizenship that would get us through this very difficult problem?
You know, I think the low-hanging fruit here is their children. I don't believe any decent human being would argue that those children should be deported. We should give them citizenship immediately without thinking twice. And then the issue is about the law. I mean, that's a very strong point that Representative Gowdy made. Maybe what you do is you give them indefinite permanent residence status instead of citizenship. There's other ways of slicing this. They want to be here. They want to raise their children. But we don't have to, we don't have to discuss deporting them. We just have to legalize them so they can pay taxes, participate as regular U.S. citizens do, without calling them citizens. There's a way.
Mayor Castro, I know some of my colleagues are a little reluctant about permanent indefinite status. This is one of the things that makes this country great. You can become a citizen. You're either born here or you earn your way in as an American. And we're all citizens equally. And so I have just a little bit of reluctance about having somebody here, an immigrant, permanently.
Yeah, to my mind, it would be unprecedented for us to create a class of folks who are stuck in this kind of limbo, who are not allowed to become citizens, but almost everything up to that line. We draw our strength as Americans from citizenship. That is the essence of who we are. Throughout the history of this nation, the biggest challenges we faced have been when we created second-class citizens, much less second-class non-citizens. And so I believe that a path to citizenship is the best option.
Mr. Teitelbaum, have we reached a state where, in terms of border security, I get the impression we're doing a little better. The rates are going down, fewer people are coming over, we're spending tons of money. What do you see in that area that we might want to look at if Chairman Goodlatte agrees that we should send some Judiciary Committee members down for a serious examination after having talked with security people here before we go there?
Are you asking me to speak on behalf of the Commission on Immigration Reform, or what I...
Your personal view, sir.
Well, I've traveled along that border many times. There is no such thing as the average border situation along that border. There are huge variations across that border as to what is happening. And my impression is, from the data I've seen, that the number of attempted crossings has declined. There are more boots on the ground, as someone else said. There's also a deep, deep recession in the United States since 2008, and more rapid economic growth south of the border. So you've got competing explanations of what is going on there, and I don't think we can actually answer your question, Mr. Ranking Minority Member, as to whether the enforcement efforts are the primary cause of that trend.
Can you give them a good grade so far?
Can I do what?
Can you give them a fair grade so far?
A fair grade?
Yes.
I think there have been serious efforts, increased efforts along the border. I don't think there have been serious efforts in the interior, as one of the other members mentioned. If you don't have interior enforcement, it really doesn't matter how good your border enforcement is. People will find a way around the barrier if they can find work easily in the United States.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. It's now my pleasure to recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, thank you, too, for your thoughtful approach to the subject at hand. One thing that I think all members can agree upon, and I assume all panelists as well, is that immigrants work hard, they create jobs, and they set a daily example of how to achieve the American dream. Immigration, in fact, has made our country great. As the chairman pointed out a minute ago, America is the most generous country in the world. We admit 1 million legal immigrants every year. That's about as many as every other country combined. So there's not even a close second when it comes to our generosity. I do think that generosity gives us the credibility to say that we need to devise an immigration system that is in the best interest of America and Americans. One way, in my view, to improve our legal immigration system, and that's the subject at hand, is to admit more immigrants on the basis of their skills that America needs today. We admit only about 6% of the legal immigrants now on the basis of their skills. That happens to be, I think, the lowest percentage of any industrialized country in the world. So I'd like to get us back to where we emphasize and encourage immigrants who have the skills that America needs. But we need to do so in a way that does not jeopardize the jobs of Americans who are in this country who are working, either citizens or legal immigrants. We don't want to jeopardize their jobs or depress their wages. So my question for Mr. Wadhwa and maybe Mr. Teitelbaum is this: how do we admit skilled immigrants without hurting American workers?
First of all, if you look at all the data, every single study that's been done, it shows that when you bring skilled immigrants in, they create jobs. And right now, we're in an innovation economy. Skilled immigrants are more important than ever, not only to create jobs, but to make us innovative and help us solve major problems. So bring the right people in, and you will make the pie bigger for everyone, and we can bring in more unskilled as well, because we will have a bigger economy. We need them. The population of America will decline unless we keep immigration going at least at the pace that it is.
Thank you. I'm not sure Mr. Teitelbaum is going to agree with you on the low skilled, but Mr. Teitelbaum?
Yes, well, I would say, in answer to your question, one way is not to admit larger numbers as temporary admissions than you have visas for permanent admissions, or you will negatively influence the U.S. workforce. And the second is a much more effective means of assessing the effects of admissions of skilled workers in particular areas on U.S. workers. So you don't want to, I would say, this is a personal statement, not for the Commission, you don't want to admit all STEM workers, because the tight labor markets are in some parts of STEM, but definitely not in other parts of STEM. Okay. And this committee has actually reflected that in, I guess it was your bill, Mr. Chairman, that was passed one time or two times in reflecting that difference at the PhD level. That was very smart of you.
Thank you, Mr. Teitelbaum. And Dr. Rohrer, any comments on that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Smith. I think there's a couple of really important things here. You brought up a very good point, and it's important to protect American workers and at the same time have a robust immigration system where skilled immigrants can come in and fill real needs. And one of the problems that we have today is that we've restricted the mobility of the skilled workers that come into the country. They're trapped in jobs for long periods where promotions can be denied, where they have no way of going to another employer that's willing to offer a market wage or advancement based on the experience that they've gained over a period of time, and towards the skills that are really required where the demand for jobs is. And I think these long periods of limbos and the restrictions on job mobility and this lack of reliance on the market to tell us what the demand is a problem.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rohrer. Mayor Castro, let me follow up with a question that the chairman was asking you a minute ago. Do you see any compromise area between the current status quo and a path to citizenship for virtually all the 11 million or more illegal immigrants in the country today?
I see the compromise as a recognition that a path to citizenship will be earned citizenship. In other words, that they'll have to pay a fine.
In other words, a path to citizenship regardless, one way or the other.
Well, I believe that's the best option, and I think history has borne out that that has served the United States best.
Okay. Let me ask all panelists this question, and maybe since my time is almost up, I'll say this. Is there any witness today who does not agree that we ought to have a system that requires employers to check to make sure that they are hiring legal workers? Is there anyone who would disagree with that system?
It was a recommendation of the U.S. Commission on Immigration Reform.
Mr. Chairman, you and I worked together to try to implement the Commission's recommendations, and we came awfully close until the Clinton administration reversed their endorsement. But everybody agrees in with some kind of a system to make sure that employers only hire legal workers. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor Castro, your testimony said that we must do at least 3 things in an immigration reform: further strengthen border security, streamline the legal immigration process so that law-abiding companies can get the workers they need, and create a path to citizenship for the estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants. It seems to me that there's one further thing that any good immigration reform should do, and that is to eliminate unjustified invidious discrimination that is present in the system. And one such discrimination is certainly the fact that people other than gay and lesbian people can sponsor their spouses for immigration into the United States so that you don't keep them separated, whereas under our laws, of course, gay and lesbian people cannot marry other gay and lesbian people. At least the federal government will recognize that, a few states will, so that the laws work what I would call a cruelty on people, an unnecessary cruelty, because under our laws it may be that the lover or partner of an American citizen can't be here, and under the laws of this foreign country it may be that the American can't go there, and you are keeping people apart. Now, there is legislation called the Uniting American Families Act, which would establish an equivalency so that the question of gay marriage apart, which is really a separate question, we will not have the cruelty of keeping loving couples apart by allowing a gay person or a lesbian person to sponsor his or her partner for immigration. This has broad, we're reintroducing that bill today, by the way. It has broad bipartisan, it has support of Republicans as well as Democrats, church leaders, members of the Hispanic Caucus, and now recently the President of the United States. Do you think this is a good or essential piece of a comprehensive immigration reform?
I believe that it would be a good piece for comprehensive immigration reform, and as you suggest, I believe that there would be significant support for that. I myself support marriage equality, but even for folks who support, for instance, only civil unions and certain rights that partners would have, I believe this is right in that vein and that it makes sense.
Thank you. And I just want to make clear that this is not the question of gay marriage. If we had gay marriage, it would be moot, but this is a question of enabling people to be together who otherwise cannot be, for no purpose at all. Purposeless cruelty, which the United States should never engage in. I have a second question for you, and that you note in your testimony that the immigration laws are broken across the board, harming businesses and separating families. There are some who support the idea of increasing the number of green cards in the employment-based system. We've heard that. But only if a commensurate number of green cards are eliminated from the family-based system. Do you buy into this zero-sum approach? And can we be a nation that supports both business groups in keeping families together?
Thank you for the question, Representative. I agree with Dr. Aurora that this is not a zero-sum game. There's no reason that we need to choose between these. I believe that we should have both employment-based and continue our family-based allocation, as well as, of course, addressing the issue of high-skilled immigrants and other skilled immigrants. I would also frankly suggest that being able to pick crops in the sun, under the hot sun, for 12, 14 hours a day to do back-breaking work is a kind of skill. Maybe not what we would call a high skill, but certainly a skill that many, many folks either do not or cannot do. So to answer your question, I believe that is a false dichotomy.
Thank you. And finally, I have one question for Mr. Teitelbaum. Ms. Teitelbaum, you say that some of the Commission's strongest recommendations were against temporary worker programs, noting that admitting large numbers of temporary workers in agriculture and other fields would be, quote, a grievous mistake. I must say I'm very ambivalent about this. On the one hand, I worry about guest worker programs bidding down U.S. wages for American workers. On the other hand, the share of the native-born workforce without a high school diploma was around 50% in the 1940s and 50s, and it's now down to about 6%. And as a native-born have grown better educated, U.S. workers have been less willing to engage in farm work, but the demand for farm labor has not decreased. So my question is, if we still have a need for on-the-farm labor, but a giant reduction in the population of native workers likely to look for work in the sector, do we have a need for a guest worker program? Is it naive to think that if we cut out foreign workers that these jobs will just be filled by American workers? And is such a program, in fact, cutting down on bidding down American wages?
Again, this is going to be my thoughts, not the Commission. The Commission was recommending against large-scale temporary worker programs for the reasons I indicated. I agreed with that recommendation. I believe it's still to be true. There is a very large population in the United States of low and unskilled workers, many of whom are unemployed and relatively unemployable. The conditions of work offered in some of the jobs you're talking about are really not very attractive compared to their alternative sources of income as citizens. And therefore, I think you have a situation in which the market disposes towards dependence upon unauthorized migrants. In addition, you have decisions made by employers as to where to invest or where to plant and what plants to plant. Are they labor-intensive plants or not labor-intensive plants, based upon the assumption of continued access to this kind of labor. So you get a kind of mutual dependency, if you will, situation in which it is correct, as the growers might say, if you took away my workforce now, all my plants, all my crops would rot in the field. But if they were pretty certain they weren't going to have that future workforce in the future, they would make different decisions about what crops to grow and where to grow them. But why should they if they assume they're going to have that workforce?
Time of the gentleman has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Backus, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Let me ask each one of you for a yes or no answer, if you can give it. If you can, I'll permit you to pass.
Yes or no?
Yes, if you can. If you want to pass, can't answer it. Do you think our immigration policies ought to be based on our own national interest? In other words, what's best for America?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. Sure.
So we all agree on that. Now, do we all agree that attracting high-skilled, legal immigrants is in our best interest? The chairman mentioned Australia and Canada, and obviously high-skilled workers in mathematics, sciences, technology. They've actually created jobs in those countries. They've created jobs for native Australians, native Canadians. It's brought down their unemployment rate. But do all of you agree that that's in our best interest and there's less contentious issues with our highly skilled workers?
Double yes.
In principle, yes. But you must be careful not to deter American kids from going into those fields.
Oh, absolutely.
By taking that action. So you just have to do it right.
Right, but it is less contentious than with our undocumented, unskilled workers, I think. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So yes?
Yes.
And Mayor?
Yes, I agree to the need to encourage high-skill immigration, sure.
Now, the chairman mentioned that some countries, and these are countries all of which have significantly lower unemployment rates than America, are actually attempting to attract entrepreneurs, engineers, mathematicians, scientists, people skilled in technology. And I think we all agree, we've all seen cases of these people being trained, some of them at University of Alabama, Birmingham, and then going back to India, some going back to China and starting jobs which compete and take jobs away from our people, and that's really a tragedy. And that Germany doesn't do that, Chile doesn't do that, Australia doesn't do that, Canada didn't do that. So should we design a system that prioritizes, not excludes other, but prioritizes those individuals?
Yes.
Once again, as long as it does not deter U.S. kids from going into the...
Oh, and let me say that with those caveats, and also in certain areas where if there are Americans that can fulfill those positions.
The general point, Congressman, is you might end up with fewer people net if you discourage the inflow of people from the largest source of those occupations who are American citizens.
Sure. I agree. Okay.
We believe, yes, that there is a need to reform the way highly skilled immigration is done today.
All right. Mayor?
I believe there's a need to reform immigration for highly skilled workers, but I also believe there's a need to reform the entire system.
Oh, absolutely. We all agree on it. But I think that my point is, and I think each of you would agree, it's going to be a much easier lift to solve the problem with highly skilled workers. This House has passed on one occasion, could have on two occasions, a bill which would address that. And the present system for our highly skilled entrepreneurs is diametrically opposed to what's done in Canada, Australia, with great success, and created hundreds of thousands of jobs there, and actually has put Americans out of work because we refuse to do that here. And Ms. Loughran and I agree on that. I mean, I think 99% or 100%. I think that the gentleman from Michigan, the former chair, and I agree. And I think we could pass a bill which would take that off the table. When you take comprehensive, then we're dealing with certain issues like full citizenship. And whatever else we disagree on, I think we would agree on that that's a more toxic, contentious issue, granting full amnesty. And I would hope that by comprehensive we could address those on two different paths, because we can pass something and solve the problem which is putting Americans out of work and is enabling other countries to compete successfully and take jobs away from us. And I would just hope that y'all would all agree with that, that let's not let the more contentious issues and this idea of comprehensive reform prevent us from this year, this month, in the next 2 or 3 months, passing something to address what is a horrible situation in this country, and that's we're training people to go back to their countries and compete against us. And we've mentioned Google, Intel, eBay, Microsoft, all of those companies, the CEOs say, for every one of those people I hire or keep in America, I can hire 3 Americans too.
We can also agree on the DREAM Act quite easily. That this is widespread agreement on.
Okay.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Watt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me say at the outset, so that nobody's misled, I'm a strong supporter of a system that encourages high-skilled workers, but the composition of this panel may leave the impression that I hope is not the one that we intend to leave, that's all that immigration reform is about. So I want to be clear that Google, Yahoo, Intel, eBay were all founded and run by immigrants, but none of them came here under a skilled worker visa program. They came here as family-based immigrants, refugees, or children of refugees. And so just to be absolutely clear on this, this emphasis that seems to be being placed on high-skill visas and reform, are we clear that that's not to the exclusion of other kinds of immigration reform and encouragement of other immigrants? And if I can get clarity on that from all 4 witnesses, I just want that on the record so that
I completely
we're not
agree with
misled.
that, but we can't lose time on the skilled, because right now the U.S.'s economy is in a slump. We're in the middle of a major reinvention. Our competitors are rising. Immigrants are fleeing. I wrote an entire book about the immigrant exodus. So we have to fix the immediate problem of skilled immigrants, a million skilled immigrants legally here waiting for green cards. We don't talk about them. We need to fix that ASAP, and we need to do the other things we're talking about, without doubt. But we can't wait on the million because they're leaving, and America is bleeding talent right now.
But if we're doing all of this immediately, I don't want to do that to the exclusion of doing the rest of immigration reform. That's the point I want. And Mr. Teitelbaum, just to be clear, you all's recommendation, I guess, that you're not encouraging low-skilled or unskilled workers, that's not, that recommendation was not about eliminating other kinds of non-skill-based immigration either, was it?
No, you may remember the main recommendation on family-based immigration recommended establishment of these priorities and the rapid admission of people in these priority groups.
Okay.
And that's by far the biggest category of legal immigrants.
And Dr. Aurora and Mayor Castro, if I can get you all to be as clear, and I'm just trying to document a record here so nobody comes back later and says this hearing was only about highly skilled, high-skilled visas, high-skilled worker admissions to the country. I mean, I think that would be a gross misperception of what we should be coming away with. So, Dr. Aurora and Mr. Castro, if you can help me clarify the record, I'd be appreciative to you.
Congressman, we're a grassroots organization and we've supported a comprehensive bill in the past, and if Congress is to come up with a doable bill that you can all agree on, we would be very happy to back it and support it. In the end, we'd like to see these problems solved, whether you decide to do them in steps and individual bills, or you take an approach that everything can be done together. We leave up to your judgment, but we realize that it's a complex problem and there are many parts to this.
Mr. Castro.
Well, I absolutely believe that this issue of immigration reform should be addressed comprehensively. And I would also add that even though it might seem, as was said, easy to do just one part of this, the STEM bill, which was supposed to be easy, did not get through the Senate. Probably the better option is to address this comprehensively at one time that will impact the entire system in a positive way.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the clarification, and with that, Mr. Chairman, I won't even go to another question because my time is about to expire.
We appreciate the diligence of the gentleman from North Carolina and commend that to all the members. And turn now to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Forbes, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank all of you for your testimony. And I only have 5 minutes, so I'm going to try to be succinct and ask you in your answers to do so as well. And Mayor, I know you've studied this issue a lot. You've prepared for this hearing or you wouldn't be here. And let me just ask you, if I gave you this pen and asked you to go back and take as long as you needed and draft this comprehensive piece of legislation, you brought it back before us and we passed it out of here and we passed it out of the Senate and the President signed it into law. We all know that there will be some people that disagree with portions of it, some people who try to circumvent it, some people who break it. I want you to fast forward now. You're a young man, and 10 years from now we ask you to come back and testify before us. And we found that the people that circumvented that law were either 10 or 10 million. Should we be prepared to draft a new path of citizenship for those 10 million people that circumvented the law that you wrote?
Thank you very much for the question. And I know that this has been a concern with regard to the 1986 law. And in fact, I'm very pleased that the bipartisan effort so far, what's been proposed by the President and the Senate, includes stronger interior enforcement.
Yeah, and I don't want to interrupt you. You can put all you want on the record, but I'm saying you've written the law. We do everything we can, despite our best efforts. There will be people who break that law and circumvent it. It may not be 10 million, it may be 1 million, but for those individuals, should we be expected to, 10 years from now, write a new path of citizenship for those individuals, however many there might be?
With all due respect, Representative, I just don't think that that's a question that can be answered right now. It's such a hypothetical question. I believe that if the Congress does an excellent job now...
Mayor, are you saying that you don't believe that there will be any people that circumvent the law no matter how well we write it? Is that your testimony?
No, I wouldn't disagree with you that there may be folks who circumvent it.
And as to those individuals, should we be prepared at some point in time, 10 years down the road or whenever, to be prepared to write a new path of citizenship for them?
I believe that that's a question, hopefully, that won't have to be answered in any significant measure by Congress in the future if you do the job right this time.
So you believe if we do the job right, there will not be individuals who circumvent that law down the road? And the reason I say it, Mayor, is we've got to ask those tough questions. It's easy to talk about comprehensive reform if we don't ask and answer those tough questions. Let me give you another one. The ranking member said there's so much that we agree on, and I agree with that comprehensively, but we can't just take a concept like comprehensive and not look at the detail, because sometimes the devil's in the details. When you talk about a lot of individuals who are here and not documented or here not legal or illegally, one of the things for us is most of them are hardworking, good people. You would attest to that, but not all of them. And there are a few of them here. For example, testimony we've had before this committee of the rise in gang activity that we've had in the country. We had testimony that 85% of one gang, the individuals here, were here illegally. Now, as to just that group, I want to ask you this question. If we have someone here who is here illegally, and not one of those hardworking people, but someone who's a member of a violent criminal gang, should we be prepared to deport them before they commit a criminal act, or should they also have a path to citizenship?
Thanks for the question. I think there's agreement across the board that if someone has committed a violent crime...
No, before they've committed a violent criminal act, they are here illegally and they are a member of a violent criminal gang. Should we be able to deport them before they commit that violent criminal act, or should they also be able to have a path to citizenship?
You mean if you determine them guilty before they've committed a crime?
Not guilty. I'm saying they're here illegally. They didn't come here illegally. And they acknowledge and we prove that they are a member of a violent criminal gang. Should we be able to remove them from the country before they commit another, or before they commit a violent criminal act?
I would just say that I believe that ensuring that America is free of folks who have committed violent crimes, that is and should be a priority. With regard to the hypothetical of people who might commit a crime or might not commit a crime, I readily concede that I'm not in law enforcement. I'm not a technical expert in that regard. But I do believe that folks who have committed a violent crime should be deported.
And Mayor, the reason I tell you is this exact situation happened in Boston. And a lady was, and a young girl was raped and brutally beaten for individuals that were here illegally, member of violent criminal gangs, and temporary protected status protected them. So at some point in time, we've got to say, we passed legislation. I hear the Senate refused to pass it. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I see that my time is expired. But Mayor, they're the kind of questions that we need answers for. And unfortunately, that's going to be part of what we have to ferret out over the next several weeks and months. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before my questions, I would like to ask unanimous consent to place in the record 22 statements from various individuals, including religious organizations, social organizations, labor organizations, as well as an op-ed from the Washington Times today from Matt Staver, the Dean of the Law School at Liberty University.
Well, seeing as Liberty University is a fine institution in the 6th Congressional District of Virginia, and I think very highly of Dean Staver, we'll admit all of those without objection to the record.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, could I have unanimous consent to introduce an article that appeared in Saturday's Wall Street Journal on our declining birth rates?
Without objection, that will be made a part of the record as well. And while we're at it, if the gentlewoman will we'll give you your full 5 minutes, but I would also ask unanimous consent that a joint statement by the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Coalition and the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference, of which Dean Staver is a member, be also made a part of the record. Without objection, all of these Documents will be put in the record, and the gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, you know, it's been so interesting to listen to the questions so far. You know, in fact, a person can be found deportable now, not just if you're convicted of an offense, but if you have admitted to committing all the elements of a criminal offense, even though you haven't been convicted. So in the hypothetical that was earlier posed, that you would have to change the law to deal with that situation. You know, I think we have a unique opportunity here to come together and come up with a situation where another Congress 20 years from now won't be dealing with this same problem. Dr. Richard Land, who was the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, was a witness before the subcommittee a number of years ago, and I always quote him because I don't want to steal his line. He said for many years there were two signs at the southern border. One said no trespassing, and the other said help wanted. And our situation after 1986, we did the Reagan amnesty, but we made no provision to meet the economic or familial needs of the country. And so you have a situation now where we have 2 million migrant farm workers, and like 80 or 90% of them are here without their papers. They are providing a vital service to the United States. You could do E-Verify and find out they're not properly here, and American agriculture would collapse. So that's not going to be helpful. What we need to do is provide a system that will actually meet our needs, both in the economy, whether it's high tech, whether it's agriculture, and that also respects the needs for American families to be united. And I would just add, it is not my belief that my son and daughter are chain migration. My son and daughter are part of my nuclear family, and I think that's true for Americans who have sons and daughters abroad. I think it would be such a tragedy if we became sidetracked on whether or not the 11 million here who responded to the help wanted sign at the border can never become right with the law and never have the aspiration to become an American. We're not talking about giving U.S. citizenship to anybody. What we're saying is, over some period of time that's arduous, you might gain legal permanent residence in the United States. And then, if you pay thousands of dollars, learn everything there is to know about the American government, learn English so well you can pass the test, and then swear to defend the Constitution and be willing to go fight for your country, only in that case could you become an American citizen. So I just think that looking back to Matt Staver, the dean, in today's newspaper article, he said that we should include appropriate penalties, waiting periods, background checks, evidence of moral character, a commitment to full participation in American society through learning English, but yet for hardworking, undocumented neighbors who aspire to be fully American, it must end with citizenship, not a permanent second-class status. And I think that we should, I hope that people will read Dean Staver's op-ed, because it's really very compelling. Now, I'd like to ask you, and first, thanks to all the people for being here. You've all been excellent witnesses. But Mayor Castro, you have talked about immigration. Your grandparents, I guess, were just like mine, were immigrants. But one of the arguments that's not been made here, but it's made sometimes in the country, is that somehow today's immigrants are different than the old immigrants, the good immigrants from before. I mean, the German immigrants, it was said, when they came, wouldn't really learn English, or, you know, the Irish didn't need to apply. The Italians were somehow morally not the same as the people they were joining. Now that all seems preposterous. Have you seen any evidence that today's immigrants from Latin America are any less meritorious than the immigrants from our American past, any less willing to learn English, become patriotic Americans? Can you guide us on that question?
Thank you for the question, Representative. This generation of immigrants, I'm convinced, is just as hardworking, just as patriotic, just as faith-oriented as immigrants of generations before that helped build up the great country that we live in today. I know that there has been sometimes, unfortunately, that type of characterization, but in San Antonio, I see folks like Benita Veliz, who graduated as valedictorian of her high school class, National Merit Scholar, graduated from college at the age of 20, big dreams, wants to be productive for the country. That's the caliber of immigrant, whether it's someone like Benita or it's someone who is working very hard in the agriculture industry, working 12, 14 hours a day. These are hardworking folks that are positively contributing to the progress of our nation.
Thank you. And I see my time has expired, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to abuse your patience.
I thank the gentlewoman. The committee is going to take a very brief recess, so those of you who need to accommodate yourselves, you'll have 5 minutes to do so. So the committee will stand in recess until, well, we'll make it till 12:20. Committee will reconvene. We'll continue our questioning by members of the committee, and the chair now turns to the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the witnesses for your testimony, and this has been an engaging hearing, and I'm looking forward to your answers and the rest of the testimony. I'd turn first to Mr. Wadhwa, and yours was, I think, Mr. Wadhwa, I'm over here on your left, yours was, I think, the most engaging, and when you talked about the inspiration that comes from the inventions that we have and how it can transform not just American society but global society, and has. But what I notice in the dialogue, it's crept in almost all of American society, is we're not separating the term. The term immigrant now means, as I listen to the panel, if I were just a casual observer here, I wouldn't know whether we're talking about legal or illegal immigrants, and I didn't actually know whether you were. And so could you define that for me and let me know what your intentions were with your testimony?
You know, what I've been researching and talking about is the people who came here lawfully, came through the front door, came on student visas or H-1B visas, who started companies, who boosted entrepreneurship. I've documented the statistics, 52% Silicon Valley, 25% nationwide, with the numbers having dropped. I've researched this recently that we're strangling immigrant entrepreneurship because we won't give them visas. I'm talking about lawful skilled immigrants. Now, we keep talking about the 11 million, 10 million undocumented, unskilled workers. Illegal workers. We don't talk about the 1 million skilled immigrants who are trapped in limbo.
Okay.
Who are doctors, scientists, lawyers who can't get visas.
So I'm really, as I listen to your testimony, I should be focusing on, you're talking about legal immigrants and their contribution as skilled workers.
Exactly.
And the chairman mentioned about 10% of our legal immigration is based upon merit, and the balance of that is really out of our control. And I remember the hearings that we've had here in this room, that number falls pretty good. It's between 7 and 11%. I agree with that. And your advocacy is that we should take a number of legal immigrants and focus on the skilled worker side of this, which would be STEM, which I support. I think that's the right direction to go. And I'd turn to Mayor Castro, and I recall you mentioning that it's not a zero-sum game, that we can have both skilled workers and unskilled workers and family reunification. And so a zero-sum game always gets my attention because we have about, 6.3 billion people on the planet. So that would be the universe that you've addressed, I think. But do you believe that there should be a limit to the number of people brought into the United States, especially if we could all have them be legal? And what is that number?
Oh, thank you for the question. First, let me say that I won't say that that I could set a number for you right here, Representative King. I will say, of course, like every country, there are only a certain number of folks who will be permitted to enter the United States. But I just don't believe that, that it is a zero-sum game. I do think that the answer is to increase the number of high-skilled immigrants that we have, but also to put the folks who are already here.
But Mayor Castro, then what I'm hearing here is that you wouldn't put a limit on any of those groups. You would just fill up those categories essentially by the demand. And that demand is potentially the entire population of the planet. Let me ask you another question, and that is, do you believe that an immigration policy in this country should be established to enhance the economic, social, and cultural well-being of the United States?
Well, I think that you and I agree that our immigration policy should enhance the economic, social well-being of the United States.
Good. Thank you.
And I believe that it has been shown that immigrants, high-skilled immigrants and what you would consider low-skilled immigrants do benefit the economic progress of the United States.
Thank you. And I turn to Mr. Teitelbaum, and I just recall the gentlelady from California saying that the agriculture would collapse if all of a sudden we didn't have the quote immigrant labor to do that. Did you agree with that, or you care to illuminate that subject a little for us, please?
Again, this is my comment, not the Commission's comment. But if you suddenly removed the entire workforce of fruit and vegetable agriculture in California and the Southwest, it would collapse. But that's not the question. The question really is, should you continue to depend on continuing inflows of people to be the workforce of that industry?
Would you agree, Mr. Teitelbaum, that there are many businesses in this country that have been predicated upon the presumption that there would be unskilled and often illegal labor to fill those ranks, and that our economic structure that we see in the United States would be dramatically different if the promise of the '86 Amnesty Act had been upheld?
Yes, there are many industries. I have talked to a lot of the farmers in those areas, and they tell me that they make their decisions about what crops to plant based upon the assumption they'll continue to have access.
And I watched it happen in my district. Thank you, the witnesses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, for 5 minutes.
I thank the chair very much. Let me particularly thank all of you for your time here today. Very important process that we're going through, and if I've ever felt the spirit of the greatness of America and what we are capable of doing, it is today and it is now because of all of your testimony. I want to put into the record quickly that in this year 2012, relating to border security, I also serve on the Homeland Security Committee, that Border Patrol agents have apprehended 356,873 in 2012 under the President Obama's administration. And the budget has doubled from $6.3 billion to $11.7 billion. I think that's an important note to make for this record as we look at how we balance security and comprehensive immigration reform. I absolutely believe, in spite of your different interests, that we cannot suffer a piecemeal process. It must be a comprehensive process. Mr. Waterhart, let me thank you for your intellect and genius. So let me ask this question very quickly. Those individuals who have come, who are now technological giants, many of them were trained in America's institutions of higher learning. Is that not accurate?
That's correct.
And so the likes of these two are American citizens, but Mark Zuckerberg went through Harvard. I think he paused for a little bit. Bill Gates went through Harvard, but a number of those that you speak, Google, Yahoo, etc., went through the nation's institution of higher learning. Could it not also be that the children of those who have different skills ultimately go through the Stanfords, Harvard, Princetons, and ultimately be the same kind of geniuses that immigrants have been, or when I say immigrants, those youngsters that you speak of, so that if you happen to be the child of an unskilled, undocumented person, you could also ascend to genius by going to those schools?
I 100% agree, and my children are going to outdo me.
Is it also true that many flock to the United States because of institutions of higher learning that are have the excellent professors such as yourself?
Absolutely.
And it is also a commitment of America to make sure that those individuals that may not necessarily be the children of first-generation immigrants, but those who look to this hearing and say, what's going to happen to me? Should we look to the promise of America for everyone, African Americans, Asians, Hispanics, Anglos? Should that be the promise of America?
I agree with that as well.
And would you commit then, when you educate our technological phase, our geniuses, that they should look to making sure everyone has an opportunity?
There's no disagreement on any of these points.
So when we talk about comprehensive immigration reform, is it an important message that no one be left out?
I agree, but the issue of timing, right now, the skilled immigrant issue is critical because we're bleeding. We need the talent, we need innovation to cure the economy. This is why I emphasize this over everything else.
And we thank you for that. Let me make you a commitment.
Right.
I'm right there with you. Right. We put the skilled immigrants right there where the comprehensive immigration reform, and we'll roll forward together. You're absolutely right. You have my commitment. Mayor Castro, if I might ask you a question about two issues. Working with immigrant issues, let me first of all say how endearing the DREAM Act youngsters are. Spent a lot of time with them in my office, literally saw a mother fall on the ground screaming in my office when we were able to say that we might have a deferred circumstance. Tragically saw a person who had a serious neurological issue be expelled from one of our public hospitals while her husband paid taxes, sales taxes, other taxes of which that hospital facility was built on, and her child was a documented individual. Can you speak to the horror of us not doing comprehensive immigration reform, the pains of those kind of stories, if we put a face on those kinds of stories? And can you relate it to the diversity of your city that includes African Americans and others who have come together and worked together and have shown productivity when we work together?
Yeah, well, I'm very proud of San Antonio over the years. People from different backgrounds, many immigrants have come and built up one of the nation's leading cities today. But you're right, I hear the stories. I've met with the dreamers of folks oftentimes who are doing great in high school. They find out that they're not here, documented. They call the United States home. America is the only country that they've ever called home. They're as patriotic as anybody else. They worry every day about their parents. They worry about themselves and whether they're going to be trapped with very little future, despite the fact that they have great talent and a lot to offer the country. It rips families apart at the seams to be in this kind of limbo, and it injures communities because we're not fully able to take advantage of the brain power of those young people. I believe that brain power is the currency of success in this 21st century economy. I also agree with you that that brain power comes from many different quarters. And my grandmother came to San Antonio through Eagle Pass, Texas in 1922 as a 6-year-old orphan. She wasn't a high-skilled worker, but 2 generations later, her grandson is the mayor of the city, and the other grandson is the congressman from San Antonio. These are the stories that we have to pay heed to when we think about the need to do this comprehensively.
Time of the gentlewoman has expired. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gomert, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Yeah, I'm down here on the chairman's far right. Imagine that. Mayor, you're right. We do have to put faces on things, and like when I saw the president with children gathered around him, as he's often doing now, I think about the financial burden we are putting on our children. First generation in American history that is actually making things worse for future generations. Instead of sacrificing ourselves, we are spending money like crazy, and part of it is health care. We have just had Obamacare a couple of years ago pass, and now seniors are seeing the massive cuts that are affecting their ability to get health care. One of the problems, it seems, with our economy, or the overspending with the burden on health care, is that even though people in business, the chamber wants to look the other way sometimes on people coming in illegally if they're working, providing cheap labor, is that the rest of Americans are paying for the health care of those who come in if they're coming in illegally. And so the health care, it's free to those individuals, but somebody is paying it. I've just wondered about, as we hear farmers, and apparently it is essential that they have immigrant workers come in, harvest crops. We've heard that over and over. Would any of you have any problem with saying, okay, you want to bring in temporary workers to harvest your crop, then you need an umbrella health insurance policy that covers the people that you're bringing in to work temporarily. I'm looking for grounds for compromise where we could work something out so we accommodate those who need temporary workers and yet not continue to bust the system. Would anybody be offended by a requirement that an employer to bring in temporary workers provide an umbrella health insurance policy? Anybody?
Well, I would just say, Representative Gomer, that I had not given that thought, but I do believe that that we need to address the 11 million folks who are already here. And with regard to future workforce needs,
well, and I understand that, Mayor, but that's not the direction of my question. And since my time is limited, I do need to move on. But you've all agreed that our policy should be what is in the best interests of the United States. We've heard before there may be 1.5 billion that want to come to the United States. Obviously, that would overwhelm our system, and then nobody would want to come here because we would be bankrupt. But we often talk about all of those who cross our borders illegally. But as the chairman's pointed out before, 40% of the people who are unlawfully in the country right now came in lawfully and have overstayed their visa, their means of coming in legally. Does anybody on the panel believe we should advertise to the world, if you come in temporarily on a visa, you don't have to leave? I mean, it may sound like a silly question, but that's a concern of mine that we may be advertising. When Steve King and I had gone over to talk with folks about, and they don't like the term illegal immigration in England, they told us it's irregular migration. That sounds like something else. But anyway, whether it's irregular migration or illegal immigration, they said they have a law that provides if you come into England, you have to swear that you will not accept any government benefits for a period of 5 years. As they said, since it's all about the best interests of our country, we need to make sure people coming in contribute before they take out. Would anybody have a problem if we had such a prohibition? We welcome you in, whatever comprehensive agreement gets worked out to have an agreement, you don't get benefits until you're here at least 5 years contributing to the system. Anybody have a problem with that?
We have to provide medical benefits regardless of who we bring in. It's a must for every human being.
Okay, so whoever we bring in, we're going to give free health care. That's your...
You have to pay for health care. They pay insurance.
So if somebody coming in pays for it, they're not getting free health care.
It can't be free. It should be paid for.
All right, thank you.
I would also just say, Mr. Representative, that as you know, legal permanent residents right now, as I understand it, don't qualify for traditional welfare or health care. So I believe that a lot of that has been resolved by the law that's in place.
You're probably aware that we do have government agencies that actually go out and recruit people for government benefits, whether they're here legally or illegally, which is something else we need to look at. But I really appreciate your time. I see my time's expired. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. The gentlewoman from California, Ms. Chu, is recognized for 5 minutes.
First, let me just reiterate that point. There's a 5-year ban on benefits for legal permanent residents, so they cannot just come in and get the health benefits. So that is totally a myth that's out there. But I'd like to ask some questions pertaining to families and comprehensive immigration reform. Mayor Castro, one of the immigration priorities for the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus is that comprehensive immigration reform protects the unity and sanctity of families by ensuring that families are reunited. Under the current immigration system, there's a significant backlog. Adult children of U.S. citizens who live in the Philippines have been waiting for 20 years to be reunited with their parents, and adult children living in Mexico have been waiting 19 years to be reunited with families. Americans really, I believe, shouldn't have to choose between their country and building a life with their children. So, Mayor Castro, as a grandson of an immigrant and a public servant, how problematic is it that families are being split apart? And why are families good for our economy and our nation?
You know, thank you for the question. This has long been the policy of the United States for good reason. Families make each individual stronger. It's the basis, I think, of much of the strength of our communities, the economic progress, the moral progress that we've made. You know, we hear stories every now and then of folks who have a dying relative in another country, and someone they've been waiting to try and bring over for years, or someone who is here undocumented who is deathly afraid of going across the border to go visit a dying mother or dying father, just can't do it because they know what the risk is. We are stronger because we've had this family-based system, and part of what we have to do for folks who are citizens who are here legally as well is to clear that backlog. We need to invest to clear that backlog and make sure that we can strengthen this.
Thank you for that. And I want to ask also about the families of H-1B workers. Mr. Vivek Wadhwa, you talked about the need for our highly skilled workers, and I totally agree. Even with unemployment at historically high levels, a large number of jobs are going unfulfilled because of a lack of qualified workers in science, technology, engineering, and math. And that's why I do support the creation of STEM visas and improvements to our current employment-based green card system. But in your testimony, you talked about how the family members of H-1B workers, our skilled workers, live as second-class citizens, that their spouses are not allowed to work, and depending on the state in which they live, they might not be able to get driver's licenses or open a bank account. And because of this, these workers are getting frustrated and returning home. So how does the fairness for the families and loved ones of highly skilled workers impact our ability to bring engineers and scientists to the U.S.? Does it serve as a deterrent not to have something in place?
Yeah, you know, I hate to say this, but the women in Saudi Arabia have more rights than the spouses or the wives of H-1B workers. It's inhuman the way we treat them. They're highly skilled in many cases. In some states, they can't get driver's license, which means that they're confined to the home. What sort of a country is this which brings people in, highly skilled immigrants, it doesn't give them equal rights? This is wrong. It has to be fixed. And what happens is that after being here 2 or 3 years, they get increasingly frustrated. This is one of the reasons why people leave here. And they have such marital problems because their wives are equally productive people. They're not allowed to work because of the current laws. It must be fixed.
Thank you for that. Mr. Arora, you had a very compelling story about coming here as one of the best and the brightest students, and then you became a leader in the biotech field, working for Amgen and now for Genentech. But yet it took you 15 years to get your permanent status, and yet you had a wife, and now you have two beautiful young children. You talk about certain solutions and that could continue family-based immigration and make sure that immigrant families are able to work together and through their combined forces pay taxes, buy homes, and start job-creating businesses. I was interested in one of your solutions, which is that that spouses and children of employment-based immigrant visa recipients that they are exempted from the employment-based caps. Could you talk more about that?
Thank you. One when you become a citizen, which of course in my case, for example, after 15 years, my character is being checked for the next 5 years to see if I can be a citizen. During this period, and I know people who've been through this, if you get married, for example, and I had a colleague like this, you can't bring your spouse into the country for a period of 5 years because that's the backlog for immediate family. And my family is here with me, so I want to say that I understand the importance of your family being with you. It's really important. Now, during these very long waits, if you're on an H-1, as Mr. Wadhwa has just stated, there are certain states that will restrict the ability of your spouse to do so much that it becomes difficult as a family unit to continue your work or to continue this wait in a meaningful manner. I count myself as very fortunate. In 2007, for that 1 month when the State Department decided to allow everyone to file adjustment of status, I was able to get employment authorization, which means that my wife could get the same. But anyone on an H-1B status does not have that privilege. Not only that,
Dr. Arora, you're going to have to summarize. Our time has expired long ago.
I agree with you completely. It's a big problem, and I want to echo what Vivek said, that it needs to be fixed.
I thank the gentleman. The time of the gentleman has expired. The chair would ask the gentleman from Texas, when I recognize him, if he would yield 30 seconds to me, so I might I recognize the gentleman from Texas, and if you would yield to me.
30 seconds.
I appreciate that. I just want to clarify for the record a statement made earlier, some disagreement here. We found in writing the STEM visa bill last year that when we extended an additional provision that allowed people who were on waiting lists for visas to come to the United States, we had to provide additional pay-fors because we looked at Obamacare, the Patient Protection and Affordability Care Act, and found that it provides benefits to anyone who is lawfully present in the United States. So even without permanent resident status, this is going to be a major issue we'll have to deal with as we look at immigration reform, because individuals on that will qualify for benefits which could be, as you know, for as many as 10 million people, very, very expensive. And I thank the gentleman and yield back to the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. The issue of immigration, to me, covers many questions, not just one or two. There are multifaceted questions to be answered across the board, and I want to focus on a couple of those in the next few minutes. We have the issue of skilled workers coming to the United States. We train them, they go home, they compete against the United States. That's one of the issues that we have. Specifically, because of my location in the Houston area, Mayor, that you're familiar with, we also have the fact that the system, to me, is broken. It allows for abuse, and I'm not talking about people who are coming here to better themselves. I'm talking about the criminals who come in the United States, mainly the drug cartels and their operation, and how they now have become so sophisticated that they can cross the border into Texas, that they've engaged now in human trafficking, and unfortunately Houston has become one of the hubs in the United States for the disbursement of trafficked people. We have the issue of 20% of the people in federal penitentiaries, when they committed the crime, they were unlawfully in the United States. Border security covers those particular issues. And we have the other issues as well. But I'd like to concentrate specifically on trying to secure the border. I'm one of those that doesn't believe the border is secure, otherwise we wouldn't have all these organized crime problems that have now been created in the United States. At the border in Texas, as you know, there's the ability for a person, different subject, to come in and cross the border daily, to go to school, to work, the 25-mile border visa system. And they use some type of card similar to this, where they are allowed to cross into the United States daily. Do you think, Mayor, because of your location in San Antonio, that if we had a better legal entry visa, whether it's a card with the biometrics, fingerprint, photograph, the different electronic things that we can put and when a person comes in the United States, slides and glides, so to speak. We know who that person is. They have permission to go to Oregon for 6 months. If that would help the overall issue of specifically knowing who comes in lawfully or not. What do you think about that?
Well, I certainly think there's room for that as a piece of it, sure. I think that the use of technology, the systems that we've been developing have been improving. I also would say, as you know, that in Texas included, I mean, the dedication of boots to the ground, of manpower at the border has been accelerated over the last few years under President Bush and President Obama like never before. I mean, we've doubled the number of enforcement agents down there since 2004. Apprehensions are at a 40-year low. So I would agree that as part of a comprehensive approach that the kinds of things that you're talking about should be a part of the discussion, perhaps part of the legislation. But that doesn't get to the issue of the folks who are here already.
Reclaiming my time, I understand that is one of the questions that has to be addressed, but it's not the only question that has to be addressed, because there are many, many issues, even legal immigration. My office, because of where we are, our caseworkers spend more time on helping people get here the right way than anything else they do, except maybe working with the military. And as has been pointed out by my friends on the other side, that's a big problem, where people have to wait for years to just come in the right way. That has to be fixed as well. One comment I'd make on the apprehensions. I know that apprehensions may be down. That doesn't mean that the border is more secure. It just means that apprehensions are down. Less people are being apprehended. You can look at that a couple of different ways. And in Texas, the governor of the state, as you know, is doing more than ever before in the state to help border security as well. So anybody else want to weigh in on improving the legal visa system so that it is more secure? Because that is a concern, as pointed out. Many people come in the United States the right way. They never go home. I mean, why would they? They're in Texas. Why would they leave, you know? And they're in San Antonio and Houston.
Well, I certainly agree with you there, Congressman.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
You know, we may well need a biometric ID system in the United States. India is IDing its...
I can't hear you.
I said we may well need a biometric ID system in the United States. India is IDing its entire population of 1 billion people. Retina scans and fingerprints. We may need something like that in the United States to, I mean, we have enough. Right now, there's no such thing as privacy anymore anyway. We might as well face it and say, okay, if you're going to work here, you have to work legally. The Canadians do that. I asked the Canadian minister, how is it that they manage their immigration? He says, because even if the illegal immigrants come here, they can't work. Therefore, there's pressure on people to legalize and do things by the book. We may have to bite the bullet over here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back my time.
Chair thanks the gentleman, and turns now to the gentlewoman from, you tell me. Oh, from California? The gentleman from California, with my apologies. It was recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to ask a couple of questions, and this of Mayor Castro, and you may or may not know the answer, but maybe you can tell me. When we talk about a pathway to citizenship, and when we talk about people who are undocumented being here and having to go at the end of the line, and what they would have to do, pay their taxes, pay fines, whatever, sometimes I think when that conversation comes up, it's as though that would only take a couple of months. And I think, well, first of all, I do support a pathway to citizenship. I don't want to be shy about that. But I wanted to know if you had some thought as to how long that would take. If somebody goes to the back of the line, it's,
Thank you for the question. First, I would just say that earlier the question was asked about, well, what is the compromise? The compromise is the fact that this is earned citizenship, that one would be fined, one would have to learn English, pay back taxes, go to the back of the line, and that line is a long line.
Right.
The fact is, as Dr. Aurora said, that for folks who are legally applying, that takes too long right now. It takes sometimes over a decade or longer. And so for anyone who thinks that this would be some sort of automatic application that somebody would be in a couple of months, that's not the case at all. This is a years-long process, and it's also earned. That's an important point to be made.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, another area that I'm concerned about, and I would like to know how this might be impacting your city, a lot of research, an issue that I work on is foster care. And because of the deportations that have taken place over the last few years, there are anywhere to 5,000 to 6,000 children who have been placed in foster care because their parents have been deported. The children were citizens. And I wanted to know if that is affecting your city and what your thoughts might be on how we would include a resolution for that situation as we do comprehensive immigration reform.
Sure. In any community the size of San Antonio, you do have examples of families that have been torn apart. And certainly I hope that in this legislation we can find a way in addressing immigration reform comprehensively to deal with those types of situations. I remember that George Bush, when he was governor of Texas, used to say that family values don't end at the Rio Grande, and that's certainly true still. That keeping the family together has been so much a part of the progress of America, and so my hope is that that can be addressed.
Absolutely, and I think when we talk about family values, we really have to consider this. And so one of the issues that I would be concerned about is those people that have been deported. How do we reunite them with their children? We did a listening tour in Miami, and I went to a residential facility for foster youth, and there were a group of children that were arriving that day in Miami from California who were being sent to live in Miami. So not only are they completely disconnected from their parents, but any environment that they might have known, and what's to happen to those kids. So when we're thinking about resources of our country, our government could wind up supporting those children all of their lives because we have disconnected them from their families. So I think it's an important issue that we factor in when we do comprehensive immigration reform. Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Teitelbaum, I wanted to ask you a question because you made reference to one of the previous members had asked you about the agricultural industry, and coming from California, clearly that's a major industry. And you said something about how if unskilled workers were not allowed in the country or were removed, that maybe growers would make different decisions about what they would grow. And I was wondering if you could give a couple of examples, because I can't think of crops that would not require farm workers. And how would a state like California that feeds a good percentage of the country then make decisions about certain crops?
I can give you a very memorable example, visiting a farm or ranch that had a very large number of apricot trees that had to be hand-picked. And I was talking with the farmer and asking him what his situation was on labor. He said, well, all of these people are undocumented, and I don't pay them very much, so I can afford to hand-pick these apricots. You have to hand-pick apricots. They're very fragile fruit. So I said, well, what would you do if you didn't have that labor force or the price went up substantially? He said, well, we're already losing money on our apricots to apricots coming into the port of San Francisco from Turkey that are undercutting what we can sell them for. I'm probably going to do this anyway, but if it happened the way you describe, I would certainly do it. I would cut down all these apricot trees, and I would plant walnut trees. They would grow great on this land, and with a walnut tree, you put a tarp under the tree, you bring up a mechanical shaker, you shake the tree, all the walnuts fall on the tarp, and that you've harvested the tree in about 10 minutes. You still need some labor, but a lot less labor. That's pretty typical, I think.
Okay, so I would just suggest that you would devastate the economy of California if California then only switched over to crops that did not require the labor of farm workers.
Oh, they will require some farm workers, always.
Right.
But the question is, how intensive is the labor needed for a given crop?
So walnuts, do you have any other examples of crops that do not require farm workers?
There are many crops that are labor intensive and many crops that are not. I mean, wheat is not labor intensive.
Okay. Well, thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the gentlewoman, and the chair is pleased to recognize the chairman of the Immigration and Border Security Subcommittee, the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayor, I want to make sure I understand you correctly and fully. Can you support a path to legal status that does not end in citizenship?
No, I support a pathway to citizenship. I believe that's a
so there's no form of legal status that you would support short of full-fledged citizenship.
I just don't believe that's in the nation's best interest.
So the answer is no.
I believe that a pathway to full citizenship is what the Congress ought to enact.
Okay.
So sure.
And I think you earlier referenced that as a compromise, and I'm curious, a compromise between what? Because I don't hear anyone advocating for full-fledged citizenship without background checks, or full-fledged citizenship without back taxes, or full-fledged citizenship without fines. So it's a compromise between what?
Well, I think you would agree with me, Mr. Chairman, that this point that you're at right now, that you're talking about, these, the fact that they would have to pay a fine, that they would go back to the end of the line, that they would have to learn English, that has been worked up as a compromise between senators from different parties and perhaps House members.
But my question to you is, that represents a compromise between what? Because I don't know anyone who's advocating against that. So you represent that as being a compromise. A compromise strikes me as a balance between two competing principles. I don't hear anyone advocating for full-fledged citizenship with no conditions precedent at all. So how is that a compromise?
Well, it's a compromise in my mind because senators from different parties, as Americans want folks to do from different parties, came together and put together a framework. I'm sure they had their divergent views, so if we went to the beginning of the process, then I'm sure there was more divergence in their views. What was put on the table, including the planks that you just stated, represents a compromise position.
What about those who are currently here who do not desire citizenship? Would it be forced upon them, or could they opt out?
Well, I believe that throughout our history, it has been left up to the individual.
So you don't have to
I don't think anybody's talking about forcing folks to become.
So you do not, because the polls I've seen, there's a large percentage that just want to work legally. They don't desire to be full-fledged citizens, so you would not force that upon them.
What I hear are an enormous number of people who want to be full American citizens. They're patriotic people. They want to serve in the military. They want to be productive for the country. They want to be full-fledged citizens, and I believe that that's in the best interest of the nation. I don't believe that we should. I guess the alternative would be, should we bar folks from becoming citizens?
And there is not a legal status short of citizenship that you could accept under any compromise, because the compromise you made reference to is a Senate compromise. There's no compromise short of full-fledged citizenship that you could endorse.
Well, of course, at the end of the day, this is in your hands as
But I'm asking you.
I know, and I believe that the compromise that's been worked out by the senators and that may be worked on by the House members, that represents a great compromise, and that Americans can support that.
What are some of the elements of the background check that you would be most interested in? Because the word background check means different things to different people. I assume it's more than just an NCIC check to see whether or not someone suffered a felony conviction. What do you mean by background check?
Well, and I readily acknowledge, I'm not a technical expert, not in law enforcement, and so I understand y'all are going to have a panel that's going to deal with enforcement.
But you are an attorney. You are an attorney. Very well trained attorney. So
not a very good law school, though.
If you were better than most of the members of judiciary, I suspect your grades were. So what would you include in that background check? Because Mr. Forbes asked you, I thought it was a very good question. If you set the bar at felony convictions, that's a pretty high standard. For those who are under investigation by the Bureau or someone else, and you could maybe meet the level of probable cause but not beyond a reasonable doubt, would you be willing to exclude them from this path?
Well, I think that what's been discussed does go beyond just folks who have been convicted of a felony. I understand that there may be some instances, but that's going to be case specific. I think that kind of thing needs to be adjudicated. It's somewhere between assuming that somebody has committed a crime and recognizing that there are circumstances where someone does present a danger to the United States and should not be in the country. I do think that there's leeway there. Okay. I would grant you that. And these are the kinds of things that I don't disagree with the general point that, you know, this is not easy. This is detailed, it's important work, but I believe at the end of the day that the compromise, the general principles of the compromise that have been worked out in the Senate are the ones that are the best option for the United States.
My very last question to you, because I'm out of time, is this. This is not our country's first foray into amnesty. And you talked about citizenship and all the benefits that confers on folks. One of the benefits it confers is that you have the protection of the law. So how would you explain to folks in my district or Congressman Labrador's who really do place a high value on respect for the rule of law why we're doing this again if it hasn't worked in the past?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you and I would agree that, as many folks have said, we are a nation of laws. We draw our strength from the fact that we're a nation of laws. At the same time, we're also a nation of immigrants, and we've progressed as a nation because we're pragmatic. And we understand that these 11 million folks who are here, that this has to be addressed. It's in our national security interest, it's in our national economic interest. So I do think that we can find a way to punish these folks for not coming in here legally, but at the same time address the pragmatic issue that's in front of us.
I thank the gentleman. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Richmond, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier, the question was posed to each of you all, and you all were given the ability to just say yes or no, and I thought it was unfair. But the question was, should America do what's in America's best interest when talking about immigration? And I guess the question, the part that was left out is, do you consider a cost-benefit analysis on each person as the only factor in what's in America's best interest? So if they're only going to come and be very successful business owners and create jobs, is that the only factor we should look at when determining what's in America's best interest? And we can start with you, Mr. Wildwood.
There needs to be a balance over here. Because if we just bring people in and there are no jobs for them, we're going to create a complete mess. They lose and we lose. What I've been arguing for is bring in a crop of highly skilled immigrants who can help this country become competitive, who can create new technologies, who can create jobs, make the pie bigger so we can bring the other people in.
But that shouldn't be the only factor, is my question.
That should not be the only factor, because you have to bring their families in as well. This is something Congressman...
And I'll have a follow-up. I'll have a follow-up for you, right. Mr. Titlebaum. Should it be the only factor?
No, it shouldn't be. Can I say more than no?
If it's quick.
The family category doesn't have that criterion, and it's the dominant category in legal immigration. So if you focus in on the skills-based or the employment-based, that's a small category.
No, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
No, I agree with what both of them said. The balance is important. The balance has always been true in this immigration system.
And Mr. Mayor?
We need a balanced approach.
And the reason why I posed the question is because, in Mr. Wildwood, you brought it up first, that why don't we just get the skilled labor part done first? Well, politically, and just being very practical about it, if we got the skilled labor part done first, do you think we would ever come behind it and finish the job? I think it has to be a comprehensive approach, or we'll never get to the hard part. So that was probably my biggest concern, especially when I hear the conversation about the category for diversity being maybe reduced or eliminated completely. When diversity adds something to this country, and we should never forget it. And if we go back to the Declaration of Independence, you know, one of the facts that was used to talk about the king was the fact that he was preventing people from coming to the country and being able to migrate here. And then if we look at the Statue of Liberty, when it says, give me, you know, you're tired and you're poor. What I don't want people to take away from this hearing is that all of a sudden we forgot about the tired and the poor and the people who are striving for a better life. So those are probably my biggest concerns when we look at just the precedent we set. And we have economic problems, and we're getting out of them like we always do. And we'll always prosper because we're resilient. But the question becomes, what about the moral ground that we would cede if we just said we're going to forget about 11 million people, we're only going to focus on skilled workers, we're not going to take care of spouses and equal protection under the laws and all those things? Do you worry about that?
I do, but the thing is that right now the country is in a mess. Our economy is in horrible shape. We have a brain drain going on for the first time in its history. It's never ever happened before. America has always been a land of immigrants, not immigrants. It's happening right now. If we wait 3 years to fix the skill problem, we'll lose a couple of 100,000 more great people who could be healing our economy. And until the economy heals, the American public will not be receptive to the unskilled workers. So it's a mess right now. Now all I'm talking about is let's agree on what we agree on, get that over and done with. Let's agree on the skill. Let's agree on the DREAM Act. Let's give some kind of a green card to the undocumented workers while we decide on the issue of citizenship. That is so toxic right now that I'm not optimistic we can solve that problem. Maybe we will. Maybe I'll be wrong. But in the meantime, let's agree on what we agree on and make things easier for everyone. I'm saying give these undocumented workers green cards so that my father has a green card, for example. He hasn't gotten citizenship. He's lived here for 30 years happily without having that problem. You don't have to have citizenship to do what's right for people. Let's solve the problem when it can be solved.
Yes, my wife lived here for 25 years on a green card until she decided to naturalize, and the only difference was she couldn't vote in the school board elections, which annoyed her. The Statue of Liberty is on the cover of all of the Commission on Immigration Reform reports, and on the diversity visas, I think if you look at the composition, the national origin and other composition of current legal immigration to the U.S., it is very diverse. When that provision was passed, there was concern it was not diverse enough. Since then, it has become very diverse. And these are adding 55,000 visas, but are getting 8 million applications each year, randomly allocated by computerized lottery. That's a somewhat odd way to set priorities. The Commission said we should set priorities and we should deliver on them. And the diversity visa program, it felt then, and I think would say now, it does not rise to that level of priority compared to the other priorities.
Time of the gentleman has expired, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from Idaho, Mr. Labrador, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm excited that we're having this hearing. I think it's important that we modernize our immigration system. I think we all agree that we have a broken immigration system, but we need to find a solution to the problems that we have by being fair. We need to be fair to the millions of Americans that want to follow the rule of law. We need to be fair to the millions of people that are waiting in line to come legally to the United States. And I think we do have to be fair to the 11 million people or so that are here in the United States illegally. So I have a few questions about this, but first I want to go, Mr. Teitelbaum. You spoke about the sibling category in your report. Can you explain? I actually agree with the conclusion of the report. I think we should get rid of the sibling category. Can you just explain a little bit, and just short, why you think that's important?
There aren't enough visas allocated for the huge volume of applications. You've got a 2.5 million person waiting list, and one of the members has already mentioned what the wait times are, which vary from 12 to 20 years depending on the country. So if you're not going to manage by backlog, which is what the Commission said we should not be doing, that's a category that is being managed by unconscionable backlogs.
And we could actually use those visas and allocate them to spouses and children.
To the higher priority.
To the higher priority.
Ones. Yes, indeed.
Okay. But something I disagree with you on the report is the guest worker issue. Yep. And I'm a little bit dumbfounded by it, and I know this report came out a few years ago.
15 years ago.
Yes. You know, in my state, in Idaho, we have a large dairy industry, and at least two Idaho dairy farmers have experienced I-9 audits in the last couple of years. In one, 32 out of the 40 employees didn't qualify to work in the United States, and the other one, 47 out of 57 did not qualify. They went ahead, fired all those employees, and they went ahead and asked for people to come work at the dairy They couldn't find a single person who applied for that position who spoke English. Now, they don't know if the people are legal or illegal because the people they hired had legal documents, and they haven't done another I-9 audit. But how can you say that we don't have a need when, I mean, that's a large number of employees that needed to be hired, and not a single person who spoke English applied for the position?
I don't know the circumstances in Idaho, Congressman. I'm sorry, but I would say that it is true that in some agricultural areas, employers, particularly in rural areas, which is where agriculture normally is anyway, are
typically
are dependent. Well, not all of which, but have become dependent on the assumption they can recruit from this undocumented workforce. And
no, but this is different. This is somebody who had to fire everybody who was working at their dairy, and they couldn't find anybody who could be, who could speak English. I don't know what their status was. I was an immigration lawyer for 15 years, and I found the same experience in some of the agricultural areas, in the dairy industry, agricultural area industries. It's hard to find American workers who want to do the job. And then your solution is just they should do something else. They should pick almonds instead of something else. But the reality is that we should let the market decide that, shouldn't we? It seems to me that even in the example that you gave us, the owner of the farm had already decided that he wasn't going to pick the apricots anymore because the market was not working. And I think we need to do something about our guest workers. So I disagree with you there. Now, Mayor Castro.
With the commission.
With the commission, I apologize. Mayor Castro, I believe, I liked your words that we progress because we are pragmatic. But yet it seems to me that your solution is not pragmatic. You say that it has to be a pathway to citizenship or nothing else. Also, in my 15 years of experience as an immigration lawyer, I talked to thousands and thousands of people who are here illegally. And what they want is they want to come out of the shadows. They want to be able to be legal. They want to be able to work. They want to be able to travel. They want to be able to feel like they're being treated with dignity. Not very many people told me, I want to be a citizen. I have to be a citizen in order to feel like I'm a dignified person. So if we can find a solution that is short of pathway to citizenship, but better than just kicking 12 million people out, why is that not a good solution?
Well, I would say that that's not the solution that's in the nation's best interest. I think that's what I said, and that would be the most pragmatic solution. And one of the reasons that I believe that is that if we don't go down that route, that I'm convinced that we're more likely to find ourselves here again in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. So, if you ask me, would that be better than zero? Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that, but is that sufficient? Does that actually address the issues that we have in front of us? No, it's not a sufficient solution.
And my time has run out, but the question I have for you and for all advocates of immigration reform is whether you want a political solution or a policy solution. If we want a political solution, you guys are going to insist on pathway to citizenship. You're going to beat Republicans over the head on this issue. But if we want a policy solution, I think there's goodwill here in the House of Representatives for us to come together, actually have a pragmatic solution to the current problem that we have, and solve and modernize the immigration system for years to come. But thank you very much.
I thank the gentleman. The gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Gutierrez, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to say that while we've been here, every minute, someone's been deported. Most of those deported have committed really no crime, other than working in the United States, which is a misdemeanor the last time I checked. They're raising their families. They're contributing. There's always the question about paying taxes. Well, they pay taxes. You can check with the Social Security Department. There's this large fund that goes unaccounted for. That means they really don't know who to attribute that money to because people have contributed. I think we need to do comprehensive immigration reform so when they pay taxes, it goes into the right account. And it helps fund and fuel our economy. I want the mayor and the state and the federal government to garner all of those tax dollars and not for it to be in the pocket of some unscrupulous employer that's taxing them but then not sending the money on. Plus, given the 1986 legislation, we all know that there was an increase in the earning ability of the undocumented once they became. I mean, everybody keeps talking about, innovation. Let me give you a little innovation. We talk a lot about the uncertainty of the market and what we do as a Congress, the uncertainty about what we do and what that causes for our financial markets. I just want everybody to think one moment. What do you think about the uncertainty in the life of 11 million undocumented workers when you give them certainty? I'll tell you what I believe they're going to do. They're going to go buy that house that they've always been thinking about buying, but since they were undocumented, didn't. They're going to buy that car. We know that 75% of our economic activity in the United States is what? Is somebody going and purchasing something. I want you to think. I want you to think about people going to insurance agencies and to banks to open accounts and to invest and to save. And most importantly, as I and other baby boomers, yes, I'm 59 years old and I'm part of that group of people that is going to be hopefully soon going into the sunset.
How soon?
Well, we have...
How soon?
And well, we have a lot of people. We have the largest percentage of people ever before in the history of our nation that are leaving our workforce in the next 15 years. We need to replace them, and we need to replace these assets. Let me take a moment to say the following. There are undocumented people in this room. There are dreamers in this room. I'm happy that the President used his executive authority. 500,000 of them are now safe from deportation. 150,000 of one of them is in my office. And I've got to tell you something. He's not a burden. He got legalized. He came to my office. We hired him. He's working. He's paying taxes. He's got health care. How did he get health care? The way most of us get health care. I don't think we should look at immigrants and say, how are they going to get health care? Well, the same way members of Congress get health care. We get health care at our place of employment. That's the same place they're probably going to get health care, and if not. So I want to say to everybody that is here, I want to quickly say to those that have come here, and I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher your name, Dr. Wadaha?
Good enough.
Good enough. And I want to say to Mr. Aurora, to both of you, we have a bill. It was introduced by the gentlelady from California. For 10 years, I insisted that nothing happened on STEM or any other particular part of comprehensive immigration reform unless we did it all. But last year, I think in good faith and to show that we wanted to work with everybody, we said 50,000. I will not object, but they needed to be clean. We didn't want you to get something while someone else lost something. We wanted to give it to you. And in our bill, 50,000, you get to come from the very first day with your wife. You get to come from the very first day with your children, because we believe we should welcome you and your talent, and at the same time not have to make a distinction between serving this country and bringing your talent and sacrificing the love and cherishing the fact that your family might not be there with you. So we think that that's important, and so I'm going to continue to work, and I say to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, we can resolve this and many other issues. Lastly, I want to say a special thank you to Mayor Castro. You just lit up our house. My wife and my daughters and my grandson, Luisito. You lit us up with your speech at the Democratic Convention, with your leadership as mayor, with your poise, with the way it is, you just make us all so proud, and with your story. And I would like to say to you that I'm so thankful that America gave your grandparents a chance and that you're here with us today, because I know that not only San Antonio, but Texas, the nation, is better because of your service. Thank you so much for your testimony here today, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. The gentleman from California, Mr. Issa, is recognized for 5 minutes. The committee will have order. This is not the way to make your point. All of those must leave. Just so any of you are not in doubt about the rules of the committee, I want to make sure everybody knows that the House rules provide that the chairman of the committee may punish breaches of order and decorum by censure and exclusion from the hearing. We just a moment ago did not have order in the hearing room. Members of the audience must behave in an orderly fashion or else we will be removed from the hearing room. And let me just say as an aside, that was not a good accent point to the excellent points made by the gentleman from Illinois. The way we will resolve this is through discussion and careful deliberation about the issues, not by disrupting efforts to educate the members of this committee and the public. And we'll resume the hearing, and the gentleman from California is recognized without penalty to the loss of any of his 5 minutes for that disruption.
Mr. Chairman, could I get an extra minute for this one? Maybe. Well, first of all, in several ways I want to associate myself with my good friend from Illinois. Luis, I'm 1 month, 9 days older than you, but that doesn't mean that there's any real difference in us as baby boomers. We are going to exit the scene, and I don't want to exit the scene without resolving a immigration problem that predated my entrance and the gentleman's entrance into Congress. That group of disruptions really didn't understand my politics. I do believe we can get to a substantial, if not complete, immigration reform bill, and I hope after 12 years on this committee of trying to get there, it's my fervent hope that this is that window of opportunity. I do have some concerns from earlier. Mr. Tittelbaum, I want to associate myself with Ms. Lofgren. I heard you say basically that we should grow different crops in California as a resolution to needing labor that we can't seem to find. Is that pretty well correct?
No, what I'm saying is that farmers and employers in general make decisions incrementally over time based upon the availability of labor at what price.
Absolutely.
And so we have allowed a system to evolve in which those farmers who have made those decisions based on that assumption are dependent on that continuing flow of labor. That's the nature of both temporary worker programs and undocumented.
Well, I want to challenge that for a moment. As a Californian, I was there in '86 when the law changed, and I've seen my farmers, some that I represented in the past, some that I still represent, flowers, tomatoes, strawberries, and then my wife's home up in Salinas County, Monterey County, literally the lettuce the majority of all lettuce comes from that one county. Majority of all lettuce in America comes from that one county. If we simply say that we can't have labor to pick that and that we need to make other decisions, it's fertile land. You're absolutely right. We'll grow something else, and we will import our lettuce from another country. If the real question is, do we have an effective program that gives opportunity to people outside the U.S. to come to the United States, work for a period of time, and periodically return home in a non-immigrant, in a migrant way? If we have an ineffective program, and we could have an effective program, and I think that's the real question. In the 90s, when you were studying this, you were studying it at a time in which the problem had been fixed and it was getting rebroken as we spoke. You had migrant labor who had become, under the '86 law, permanent, and they were beginning to either be in the management ranks of agriculture, or they were leaving agriculture. And that's pretty understandable. But isn't it true in the 90s, true today, that there are tens of millions of people outside the U.S. who would stand in line to get good paying, by their standards, migrant jobs here in America, and would do so under a set of rules that were fair to them and fair to us?
If they were fair, that's a big if, of course, because temporary worker programs generally have not had that character. And then I would suggest...
Well, let me challenge that, because, you know, I want a successful resolution. And I believe a successful resolution is, one, deal with people already here in an appropriate and comprehensive way. Two, obviously, empower us to bring in the people who add to our economy. And three, deal with low-skilled jobs that in many cases, if people come to this country, they do them for a short period of time. Is our standard today supposed to be an American wage for an American job, or, and I want to go to Mr. Wadawa, or should it be a wage which is completely fair and greater than the wage someone would find in their home country for coming here, and sufficient for them to not only earn a living, but also go home with more money? And if that's the standard, then isn't that an achievable standard where it's a win-win? We can get our crops dealt with in a decent way, they can be better off for it, and we can have a flow of labor for that one portion that, in fact, would not be subject to chain migration.
The Commission recommendation said that that was an attractive goal but not possible to achieve, number one.
Oh,
number two,
not possible to achieve. I'll go back to my premise, and I want to be quick. My premise was that we pay more than they would find in their home country, but not necessarily what we're paying today with all the rules under the ag program of H-2A.
Right. The other thing, Congressman, you might want to look at is the backlogs that have been generated that have lots of people who are not particularly skilled waiting. They're entitled in some sense to a visa, but they're in the backlog.
Okay, well, I hear that you say it couldn't be done then and it wasn't going to work, but I work with Mr. Berman on this committee believing that it could. Is anyone that has a different opinion there that would like to comment on the ability to take care of that one portion in a way in which Ms. Lofgren and I could see crops that in fact people want to eat be grown?
If you look at Canada, Canada has made the guest worker program work very well. For low-skilled labor, that is not a bad solution. That's actually a good solution. For high-skilled labor, you can't do that because you want the high-skilled workers.
We want them here permanently, absolutely.
And so on.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your indulgence.
I thank the gentleman. The gentlewoman from Washington, Ms. Delbene, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I come from a district that has lots of technology in the southern part of the district, home of Microsoft and many other technology companies, a lot of biomedical device companies, and also a very rich agricultural industry of dairies and berries and specialty crops. So immigration is very, very important from many different aspects. I wanted to start with you, Mr. Wadhwa, and we talked a lot about H-1B, but you also talk about a startup visa program, and I wondered if you could elaborate what you think needs to be in such a program and how that would work in conjunction with the H-1B program.
The startup visa would do wonders for Seattle, it would do wonders for New York, it would do even more for Silicon Valley. There are literally tens of thousands of companies that would be started almost overnight if we gave these entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs the ability to do that. Right now they can start companies. If you're on an H-1B visa, you can start a company but you can't work for it. That's brain dead, right? So we would suddenly have a boom in entrepreneurship like we haven't conceived before. There's no reason not to do it. It should be done independently of everything else we're doing. Just get that done so we can fix the immediate problem. Then there's the issue of H-1Bs. The big companies are lobbying very hard for it. They need it. I mean, there are debates about whether they take jobs away. In some parts of America, you don't need H-1Bs. In parts where the skilled immigrants are, you do need H-1Bs. Brookings Institution did a great study on that, so we need those also. But the more urgent thing there is to give green cards to the million already here on H-1B visas who are stuck in limbo. Let them start their companies, let them buy houses, let them enjoy the rights that Americans enjoy.
We talk a lot about starting up companies, but also a lot of research and a lot of startups. I was an entrepreneur, come from great basic research that's happening at our universities. And so how do you think the relationship of our immigration program has an impact on the education we're able to deliver both in the medical area as well as in the technology area?
I think we're completely in sync on that. We need these researchers coming and doing great research at our universities, and then we need people leaving the universities and starting companies. That's the one thing we need to fix in the United States system, is to commercialize more research, because that would again lead to a big boom in startups. Right now, the system doesn't work because the researchers can't get permanent resident visas. It's the same problem that everyone has, that we've basically slowed down American innovation for no reason whatsoever.
Dr. Arora, we were talking about healthcare, and obviously we talk a lot about kind of technology, and we forget that there's many needs not just in research and healthcare, but across the healthcare system. I wondered if you wanted to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yes, it's clear from a number of workforce reports that with the baby boomer generation retiring and with a new healthcare environment, there is a serious shortage of healthcare workers at various levels. Physicians, and certainly there's a maldistribution aside from everything else. There are a number of areas that are simply not medically served appropriately. There are certain specialties that are underserved. There's issues with getting nurses to the right hospitals. So there are a number of issues. It's also hard when you come in on a pathway like mine. I was on a J1 exchange visitor visa to go into a research field if that's your desire, and it took me several years to make my way out to that because of the kinds of restrictions that are placed. So we've always advocated that when you go through the immigration pathways, especially the skilled immigration pathways, there should be a great deal of portability and market-based characteristics to this so that people people with skills gravitate towards where the demands are and where their skills are appropriately needed and where they can contribute best. And healthcare is no exception to that. I've had the privilege of working with Senator Conrad's office in the past on his Conrad 30 program, of which I am a graduate, I should say. And they're looking for permanent authorization. They're looking for physicians who go to underserved areas and provide service, not to have to stand in these backlogs at the end of service. And those are all great ideas and they should be a part of.
Thank you. And then when we talk about agriculture, we've been talking a lot about seasonal workers, but I know in the example that my colleague from Idaho brought up earlier in the dairy world, and we have many dairy farmers in my district, these aren't seasonal workers, these are year-round workers that folks are struggling to make sure they have a strong workforce. And so do you feel differently about the ability to address those issues, Mr. Teitelbaum, versus the seasonal workers? I mean, there is an economic driver to this too.
If they're year-round, then they're not really temporary workers. Seasonal is more temporary. So I think, again, it's...
But there's still a gap.
Yeah.
There's still an employment gap.
It's got to, you've got to consider whether the jobs are attractive enough for the underemployed U.S. workforce, who could be attracted if they were attractive. But I don't know what the conditions are in the farms and dairies that you're describing, so I can't comment on that.
But you think it's merely a financial issue in terms of how much folks are paid versus the types of jobs and the skill involved in those jobs? As Mayor Castro said, these aren't necessarily low-skilled, they're different skilled.
Well, Congresswoman, I did pick strawberries in the summer in Oregon, not so far from your district.
I think we went to the same school, actually. So.
Did we?
We did.
I didn't know that. It was a interesting, difficult, well-paid job for a college student in the summer. I don't think there are any jobs like that anymore. It's a different workforce that does the strawberry picking in Oregon now. So I think you can see that there's been a kind of shift in the origin of the workforce. Did we really go to the same college?
We did, in Portland. But I think I've used all my time. Thank you.
I thank the gentlewoman, and the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Farenthold, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and it's good to have Mayor Castro here from San Antonio. San Antonio is a lot like my hometown, Corpus Christi. They just don't have the bay or the beach, but you do have a pretty good basketball team. And I wanted to visit with you a little bit, because I really do sympathize. We've got a big problem here, and I think we all agree that our immigration system is broken. We've done a lot of case work in our office, especially when we still had Brownsville as part of the district that I represented. My heart is just broken by some of the family issues that I see, and also my heart is broken by the fact that many people who are in this country without proper documentation are basically an underclass that aren't afforded the full protection of the law. You see, if you're here illegally and you see a crime on the street, you're afraid to call the police for fear of you getting involved in it. And you're open to exploitation by unscrupulous employers, and it's a real problem, and I think it needs to be addressed. I've spoken with a lot of my Republican colleagues, some of my Democrat colleagues, and a lot of folks back home about the issue. And it seems like the stumbling block for almost everybody is the pathway to citizenship that you've been talking about for such a long time. We look at the promises of the 1986 immigration reform when we granted citizenship to so many people that we were going to seal the border and make sure this was a one-time deal is the way. And we see that has failed. My question to you is, how do we not end up in the same situation 10, 20 years down the road if we do this again? My fear is that what we're saying by a pathway to citizenship is that, all right, you come over here illegally. Let's say we seal the borders 100%. Nobody can cross the border illegally. You're still going to have people overstaying their tourist visas. You still have people overstaying their student visas. And the natural belief is, all right, they've done it twice, I just wait them out, and they do it again, and we create this underclass of people who can't have a real job, that are selling bootleg DVDs in the flea markets, or you know, working whatever underground economy they use. How do we craft this so we don't fall into the same trap?
Well, thank you very much for the question, Representative Farenthold. Good to see a fellow Texan here from South Texas. First, I believe that as a nation we are stronger because we ask folks to take an oath, take an allegiance to the United States of America.
No question about it.
And that involves full participation in the democracy and in citizenship. I just cannot imagine an America where we consign these folks to an underclass status. In other words, we'd be telling them, you will never, ever, ever become a citizen of the United States.
So what do we put in the law to not invite people to where we're back doing the same thing again? That's my concern.
Sure. First of all, I do think that the only way you're going to accomplish that is with a comprehensive approach. The one thing I know is that if you try and piecemeal it, the chances are that you will find yourself here 10, 15, 20 years from now. But more specifically, I believe that this legislation should include enhanced border security, enhanced interior security, the ability to...
Would you support the proposal for a national biometric ID?
Well, I would support, sure, I would support using some technology to help ensure that people are here who say they're going to, you know, who are here legally.
I'm not sure I'm there on that, but go ahead.
You know, whether it's that or something like it, you know, there are people more qualified to speak than me on that. But I would say that including an ability for employers to verify the legal status that is better.
So we tried to do that and failed, and you're still going to have the underground employers if you've got people who are overstaying their student visas. My concern, and you've answered this different variations of this question time and time again. How do by granting a pathway, a very generous pathway to citizenship, and maybe we tighten it up, maybe we find the compromise there, but how do we avoid creating an incentive for people to continue to come here? That's what my constituents and most of the people that I'm talking about, that's the big stumbling point.
I think what you do is that you solve the issue that you have in front of you, that you improve the ability to keep folks out who shouldn't be here, and to you know, to ensure that people don't overstay their visas. There are ways to work on that.
I see I'm out of time. I mean, I just don't see how you do that without, you know, chipping everybody who comes over here to see the Statue of Liberty to track them. I'm really concerned about this.
Throwing our hands up is not an option.
All right. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Garcia, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor Castro, I wanted to ask you what type of computer repair did your grandparents engage in?
My grandmother actually ended up working as a maid, a cook, and a babysitter.
There we go. High skill then. I wonder what this hearing would be like if we were like Canadians, desperately seeking people to come to our country because we simply have no one who wants to be there. It's not like Texas where people just want to be in Texas or Miami. I worry about it. You know, I've heard your testimony, Mr. Wadhwa, and I worry about it because you seem to create a crisis after saying that our country's a mess. I hope you were just talking about our immigration system, because what brings people to our country is precisely that opportunity. You would agree with me, correct?
I agree. For the moment, we are the only place.
And you'd agree with me that that suffering that you're talking about is also being visited on immigrants that are already in this country that don't have documentation, families being separated, people being deported. Right. You'd agree that that's a bad situation.
Agree.
Why do you think we should make that decision? Why should we decide on highly technical people which are barring down the door to come into our country and not decide for those who have invested and been here for such a long time?
We should decide both, but right now the issue of the undocumented is toxic. America is divided.
It's toxic because we give up on it, don't you think? I mean, if you had been given the choice to be fortunate enough to pick strawberries in the paradise of Oregon, would you have taken that choice?
I might have, depending on my circumstances, but...
No, but under your circumstances, would you have taken that choice? And the answer is no, correct?
What I'm saying is give them green cards, legalize them. The green card is a wonderful way of being here. The only difference between the green card and citizenship is the right to vote.
It's called taxation without representation.
Political balance.
It was an essential element of
that's why this battle is being fought, because the Republicans know that they're going to lose that battle if we legalize another 11 million people. Let's call a spade over here.
Look, the problem, Mr. Wadhwa, I think, is that you make a choice. You make a choice that's very worrisome.
The choice of a green card now or citizenship 5 years from now, everyone would accept green card immediately.
No, absolutely, people would choose that, just like people choose every day. The other question I'd ask for you, do you think there's some kind of paradise by the folks who have been here 10, 15 years picking strawberry or potatoes or corn or apricots, that heavenly paradise of being an illegal worker? Do you think that's a particularly good circumstances for the last 10 or 15 years that people do this? Do you think, I'll ask you, Mr. Teitelbaum, do you think that that's a good thing? I mean, are they happy to do this? They want to be in this permanent underclass?
I do not think they...
Right. And is there a history of any great country in the world that didn't have immigration headed towards its borders?
Say it again, sir.
Is there a history ever in human history of a country that was successful and didn't have immigration? I mean, I believe that from the Babylonian Empire through the Roman, through the British, and to today, every nation that's a winner nation has immigration, correct?
The Commission was a strong supporter of a substantial legal immigration system.
Do you remember what the Statue of Liberty, which covers the cover of your report, says?
Well, the statue doesn't say it. It's on the pediment.
Correct.
I know the poem.
Right.
I am a Lazarus, and my first daughter's name is Emma.
I think we make a mistake here if we engage in this debate and think that there is some paradise. Mr. Aurora, you've spent how many years trying to make your status permanent?
More than 15.
And you would agree that that is not a particularly favorable place to be. And you would agree that those who, even like yourself, who are highly technical, making a good salary, but finding all these impediments is not a good thing for America's productivity.
No, it's not.
And I would assume that because you want this status for yourself, you would want it for all others who find themselves in a similar situation.
Yes.
Look, I think that the issue here is that we mistake, and the folks on the other side might be missing, is that this is no paradise. That people work awfully hard on the American dream, and all they want is an opportunity. And I want to be clear here. A pathway to citizenship doesn't mean that we're going to sign these guys up to be citizens. That is a choice that is made. I'm sure in your city, Mayor, you would love more people to be registered to vote, but yet they're not. And that's a choice people make, just like citizenship, correct?
Sure, that's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the remainder of my time.
I thank the gentleman, and the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Holding, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Castro, I recognize your resistance to finding a middle ground, something short of full citizenship. But I'd ask you, if you were an illegal immigrant and the United States was actually in the business of enforcing our immigration laws, and your choice was convicted criminal or almost citizen, you would choose almost citizen, wouldn't you?
As I said before, do I believe that something is better than zero? Sure. I don't believe it's sufficient. I also don't believe that that addresses the entirety of the problem here.
And, you know, redirecting your attention back to Mr. Forbes's question, which you thought was hypothetical, in that if you were given the opportunity to write the law and ensure that it passed, and we found ourselves 10 years later with a large population of illegal immigrants in the country, would you enforce the law, or would you come back and find another pathway to citizenship? I would suggest to you that it's not a hypothetical question, because it's precisely the question that we're dealing with right now. 25 years ago, we passed a comprehensive bill, and here we have, you know, a low estimate of 11 million illegals in the country. Some estimates, many millions more. What is the mistake that we made in 1986 that we do not need to make this time around to ensure that we don't have to do this again?
Well, I think one of the things that we can do, as was mentioned earlier, is to continue to enhance border security and also to work on interior security. Technology has benefited us during that time. So we have an opportunity here, you have an opportunity here, the Congress has an opportunity to pass a comprehensive, very well thought out bill. And of course nobody can guarantee, and you're right, there probably will be some folks who fall into that category in the years to come. But
so
the American people
mistake that we made is we didn't enforce the law.
Well, I think somebody else will have to speak to that. We can't just throw up our hands because we think we're going to have some challenges later. That's not an option. Doing nothing is not an option.
I agree doing nothing is not an option, but I also think enforcing the law should have been done and has to be part of the future. Mr. Wadhwa, my father-in-law is British. He's an engineer, and in the course of his career he has managed worldwide construction for 2 pharmaceutical companies, one based in the United Kingdom and one based in Switzerland. And through all the years that I've known him, he has complained the most about the immigration laws in the United States and the difficulty it has been not only for him at times to work in the United States, but for getting team members in from other countries to work on large construction projects, pharmaceutical manufacturing and research facilities here. You have experience in Australia. Give us just a little snapshot of if one was a U.S. citizen engineer and wanted to go to Australia and manage a billion-dollar construction project, how much of a hassle would it be?
Australia right now makes it very easy to come there. Canada is doing the same. If you're a skilled immigrant, they're welcoming, you know, immigrants to come over there. It's harder to get green cards in many other countries, but the Australia I knew was different than Australia today. I had to fight to get Australian permanent residents because they had a wide Australia policy. Today, they welcome anyone who graduates from the universities. They welcome foreigners to come and start companies. Your father-in-law is like everyone else in Silicon Valley. They're you know, starved for talent. Their companies are starved for talent. They want to hire the best and brightest from all over the world, but we won't let them. It's like if the country was a football. This is my colleague at Stanford, Dan Siciliano, talks about if the country was a game. If we were playing football as a country, we said the only people you can hire are people from within the company. We're basically locking out the world's best talent needlessly.
My district borders on the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, and there are numerous high-tech companies there, and a number of very large software companies are there. And I've heard from them that when they have difficulty getting someone in the United States, often what they're able to do is just have them located in Canada and Skype in their input.
That's what's happening.
And they pay the taxes in Canada. They don't pay the taxes in the United States.
In Silicon Valley, that's commonly happening. So they're setting up our offshoring centers in India, China, and Vancouver, everywhere else in the world except Silicon Valley. We want these people here so they can pay taxes here, they can interact, and they can start more companies after they finish their projects.
Thank you very much. You're back.
The gentleman from New York, Mr. Jeffries, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Wadhwa, you have indicated throughout your testimony the need, perhaps for reasons of policy or for practical reasons, to emphasize, as we tackle this immigration issue, highly skilled visas. Certainly, you've distinguished yourself during your time here in America. You founded a company, 1,000 plus employees. You've contributed to the academy. You've written a book. You've taught at some of our most significant and distinguished universities here, contributed much to America. Now, as it relates to our immigration policy, of course, there's an appropriate place to deal with the highly skilled immigrant issue. We also have a history of dealing with refugees with compassion that makes sense for who we are and what we represent, our democratic values. We have a history of making sure we grant visas in recognition of the fact that we need to draw from people from all across the world. That's the premise of the diversity visa program, that makes us stronger. And of course, inherently, the need to emphasize and promote family unification for reasons of fairness, for reasons of efficiency, for reasons that clearly make sense for the integrity of our democracy as well as the well-being of our economy. The gentlelady from California already has made the point that some of the most significant startup companies, the Silicon Valley success stories, were started by immigrants, whether that's Yahoo or whether that's Google, whether that's eBay, Intel, who did not come into this country through the highly skilled immigrant visa program, but through other means of immigration. Now, I think you gave an interview on November 20th, 2012, to a publication at the Wharton School of Business, very distinguished school in Pennsylvania, where you stated, I was in New York in the 1960s as a child, and being in America is quite an experience. I left in the late 60s, but I'd always wanted to come back. The first chance I got was in 1980 when my father got transferred to the consulate in New York City. Would you agree, based on your own experiences here in America, that the notion of family unification, of the unit being together, has been and should continue to be an integral part of what we do as it relates to comprehensive immigration reform?
Without doubt, I agree with that. There's no dispute on that. The only thing I've been arguing is that rather than 120 or 140,000 visas for skilled immigrants, double it or even triple it for a few years, because we want to bring in an additional pool of skilled talent that can heal the economy and help us take advantage of all these technology advances I talked about.
Am I correct that your own experiences demonstrate the importance of family unification as an immigration value? That's correct.
You're absolutely right that the children of immigrants go much further than their parents do. All of these things are absolutely correct.
Now, there's been
a little bit of balance.
Thank you. There's been this dichotomy that's been presented as to how we find common ground in terms of the immigration reform debate. On the one hand, you've got mass deportation that was presented as an alternative. On the other, you've got a pathway to citizenship. But I believe, Mayor Castro, you've indicated you agree that that seems to be a false dichotomy, that the most appropriate construct is, on the one hand, mass deportation, on the other hand, open and unsecured borders. And I believe that on both extremes, the overwhelming majority of Americans believe that neither is appropriate for reasons of humanity or practicality. And so if that really is the appropriate construct, mass deportation on one hand, and on the other, open, unsecured borders, then the question is, how do we find common ground? How do we compromise based on those two wide-ranging extreme alternatives? And would you agree that in that scenario, that a pathway to citizenship is one alternative, compromise, tough, but possible, and ultimately obtainable, firm but humane, and that the only other possible compromise, which was raised by others on this panel, is permanent second-class status, notwithstanding the fact that those permanent second-class residents would have passed a background check, paid back taxes, paid a fine, perhaps gotten an education, perhaps served in the military, and gotten to the back of a very long line. Could you just comment, Mayor Castro, on those possible compromise alternatives and what seems to be most consistent with who we are as Americans?
Yeah, I believe that you've laid it out well, that on the extremes you have mass deportation of 11 million people. That's not going to happen. We're not going to, on the other end, open up our borders. That's not in the national interest by any means. That the bipartisan proposal and the President's proposal represents an effective compromise, remembering that this is earned citizenship. The alternative truly is a recipe for creating a class of second-class non-citizens in the United States.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Collins, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the good things about being last is that you get to listen, you get to hear a lot of questions, you get to hear, and in this case, you get to hear a lot of hyperbole on both ends. You get to, and really that's the question that I'm sitting here with right now, is I've heard a lot of discussion and a lot of, well, if we don't do this, you know, if we don't pass this, it's horrific, and these kind of questions. But just a brief moment, I come from Northeast Georgia, very agricultural district, but it's also on the border of Atlanta, so we get a lot of what I'll call the mixed blessing of both the need of immigration, the need for workers, and the need for those industries, dairy, poultry, other things. But we also deal with those of the hardworking taxpayers who've been there, who is a transitional area, who are concerned about their way of life and also concerned about being fair and honest and open with them. They have a deep faith. I believe, contrary to some that have said that the only way you can show your true faith, I'm a pastor, is by just opening up your arms and forgiving and not having any rule. I believe you can hold both. I'm a lawyer as well. I hold both grace and law. I think we've got to look at that. The question that comes to mind here is I come from also a state of Georgia who has dealt with this issue. For some in this room, it may not have been a very good way, but we have dealt with it, and we dealt with it in a way that is still in progress. And I think it took a step from a state perspective to say, what can we do, because the federal government has not. Now, what concerns me here is I keep hearing it's definitional. And I'm a little bit retentive on some things, and I'm the last one, so I'll just make these points. Comprehensive immigration reform, what I've become concerned about, and I'll start with you, Mayor, is when I hear comprehensive in this hearing today, what I hear is it's comprehensive if it has a specific outcome I like. It's not comprehensive if it doesn't lead to a specific end. And then I just have heard, and just in recent testimony and questions here, really that compromise between two untenable paths is not compromise. Compromise between two things that would never take place is not compromise. You're taking two extremes and basically saying there's a compromise in the middle, and the reality is you're not compromising, because those two would never exist. It's a fantasy. You also have stated in this that you felt it was in the nation's best interest for a pathway to citizenship. That is correct?
Sure.
Okay. The question I have here is, do you believe that all immigrants come to America, cross the border legally or illegally, for the same reason? Yes or no?
I believe that the vast majority of them come for the same reason, but I can't say that every single one of them comes here for the same reason, no.
Okay, so at least in the process of what we're looking at here, is there at least a room for discussion? And look, even in the diversity of my district, which is very conservative, there is a need for us to deal with all aspects of this. Okay, from the security aspect to the legal aspect that we've talked about and where we need but also from the ones who are already here. The question has, though, if we only insist on comprehensive and we sort of, I won't say demonize the process or say that we're not accomplishing what we're here for, if the only way is to have a citizenship ending, then are we not doing a disservice for those who come here to work and are liberty and have a deep love for the country they came for, but they come here for economic reasons? And to give them something that has been said here, they lived here for 30 years on a green card. They lived here in a different way. My concern is compromise in your mind only, or comprehensive, is the definitional we're using here, is comprehensive will only take place with a desired outcome at the end.
I would say, I use the word sufficient or effective. I think the only effective way to address this is to make it create a pathway to citizenship. Remember also, you're talking about 8 to 10 years before any one of these
Not my question, Mayor. I'm dealing with definitional because this is what's going to get interesting over the next few months and even as we go forward. If we only view comprehensive immigration reform under the guise of an outstanding outcome or an intended outcome, then I have a trouble with that, because what we're setting ourselves up for is one side may be coming to the table with honest, open ideas for reform, but if in the end all we are hit with is you didn't do comprehensive because we didn't get a desired result.
I just disagree with the characterization.
Well, I think that's what's been testified here too, and especially when you basically state that you believe in the nation's best interest, there's only one path. that should be, and that should be citizenship, when really there's also other alternatives that are out there. It is a best interest, but I don't think from a comprehensive standpoint you can tag the two, and that's what I've heard, being the last one I've heard all throughout this process. Look, I do not believe circumstances are easy here, as was testified earlier, for any one who is here in a status that is not legal or a status in which they're hiding has been set in the shadows. And I think this is from whether it's a high-tech industry or not. But also the one thing I never want to lose sight of is there is hardworking taxpayers who have been here who are also having they do hard work as well. They get up and go to work every day. We've got to find a balance for the two, never forgetting what we're looking at. And that's my concern. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
You know, I believe that if we provided green cards to all the undocumented workers immediately, if we give their children citizenship, and if we fix the skilled immigrant problem, there will be consensus nationwide. And we don't have to get into these toxic battles about citizenship or not citizenship. That can be decided a decade from now. When the economy has healed, things are different, America has evolved. It doesn't have to be all or none immediately. It can be done over time. Right now, these people just want to be legalized. They just want the right to be able to live here with dignity. Let's give it to them immediately without wasting time. We're making this country suffer through needless debates when it can be resolved right now.
I think we're definitely looking at it from a perspective of overall look, and I think I appreciate you coming here and testifying from your different point of views. I think, like I said, the main concern we got to have here is let's not trap ourselves into definitional reasons of comprehensive or other things that exclude or include, and then in the end we say, well, we didn't get it because it didn't fit my definition of what comprehensive means. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for his questions, and I thank all the members of the committee for the questions to this first panel, and I especially thank the members of the panel. You've endured more than 3 hours of questions, and it's been a very enlightening discussion. So thank you for making the trip to Washington to participate, and we'll excuse you now and turn to our second panel. If the members of this panel would make their way to the hallway, they can speak with the folks out there, and that way our second panel can take their seats. Well, so far these names. Hey, how you doing? Good to see you.